can cast no such glorious sanctity. They will think of these public caravansaries as an early stopping place, malodorous with old victuals, coffees perpetually steaming, and meats in everlasting stew or broil, the air surcharged with carbonic acid, and corridors along which hung boarders come staggering at 1 o'clock in the morning, rapping at the door till the affrighted wife lets them in. Do not be guilty of the sacrilege or blasphemy of calling such a place a home. What a home is. A home is 4 walls enclosing one family with identity of interest, and a privacy from outside inspection so complete that it is a world in itself, no one entering except by permission, bolted and barred and chained against all outside inquisitiveness. The phrase so often used in law books and legal circles is mightily suggestive: every man's house is his castle. As much so as though it had drawbridge, portcullis, redoubt, bastion and armed turret. Even the officer of the law may not enter to serve a writ, except the door be voluntarily opened unto him, burglary, or the invasion of it, a crime so offensive that the law clashes its iron jaws on any one who attempts it. Unless it be necessary to stay for longer or shorter time in family hotel or boarding house, and there are thousands of instances in which it is necessary, as I showed you at the beginning, unless in this exceptional case, let neither wife nor husband consent to such permanent residence. H. Azotus to morals. The probability is that the wife will have to divide her husband's time with public smoking or reading room, or with some coquettish spider in search of unwary flies, and if you do not entirely lose your husband it will be because he is divinely protected from the disasters that have whelmed thousands of husbands with as good intentions as yours. Neither should the husband, without imperative reason, consent to such a life unless he is sure his wife can withstand the temptation of social dissipation which sweeps across such places with the force of the Atlantic Ocean when driven by a September equinox. Many wives give up their homes for these public residences so that they may give their entire time to operas, theatres, balls, receptions and levees, and they are in a perpetual whirl, like a whip-top spinning round and round and round very prettily until it loses its equipoise and shoots off into a tangent. But the difference is, in one case it is a top and in the other a sole. The les and peanuts. Beside this there is an assiduous accumulation of little things around the private home which in the aggregate make a great attraction, while the denizen of one of these public residences is apt to say, "What is the use? I have no place to keep them if I should take them." Mementos, bric-a-brac, curiosities, quaint chair or cosy lounge, upholsteries, pictures, and 1,000 things that accrete in a home are discarded or neglected because there is no homestead in which to arrange them. And yet they are the case in which the pearl of domestic happiness is set. You can never become as attached to the appointments of a boarding house or family hotel as to those things that you can call your own, and are associated with the different members of your household, or with scenes of thrilling import in your domestic history. Blessed is that home in which for a whole lifetime they have been gathering until every figure in the carpet, and every panel of the door, and every casement of the window has a chirography of its own, speaking out something about father or mother, or son or daughter, or friend that was with us a while. What a sacred place it becomes when one can say, "In that room such a one was born, in that bed such a one died, in that chair I sat on the night I heard such a one had received a great public honor, by that stool my child knelt for her last evening prayer, here I sat to greet my son as he came back from a sea voyage, that was father's cane, that was mother's rocking chair." What a joyful and pathetic congress of reminiscences! Hospitality curtailed. The public residence of hotel and boarding house abolishes the grace of hospitality. Your guest does not want to come to such a table. No one wants to run such a gauntlet of acute and merciless hypercriticism. Unless you have a home of your own you will not be able to exercise the best rewarded of all the graces. For exercise of this grace what blessing came to the Shunammite in the restoration of her son to life because she entertained Elisha, and to the widow of Zarephath in the perpetual oil well of the miraculous cruse because she fed a hungry prophet, and to Rahab in the preservation of her life at the demolition of Jericho because she entertained the spies, and to Laban in the formation of an interesting family relation because of his entertainment of Jacob, and to Lot in his rescue from the destroyed city because of his entertainment of the angels, and to Mary and Malta and Zacchaeus in spiritual blessing because they entertained Christ, and to Publius in the island of Melita in the healing of his father because of the entertainment of Paul drenched from the shipwreck, and of innumerable houses throughout Christendom upon which have come blessings from generation to generation because their doors swung easily open in the enlarging, ennobling, irradiating, and divine grace of hospitality. I do not know what your experience has been, but I have had men and women visiting at my house who left a benediction on every room, in the blessing they asked at the table, in the prayer they offered at the family altar, in the good advice they gave the children, in the gospelization that looked out from every lineament of their countenances, and their departure was the sword of bereavement. The Queen of Norway, Sweden and Denmark had a royal cup of 10 curves, or lips, each one having on it the name of the distinguished person who had drank from it. And that cup which we offer to others in Christian hospitality, though it be of the plainest earthenware, is a royal cup, and God can read on all its sides the names of those who have taken from it refreshment. But all this is impossible unless you have a home of your own. It is the delusion as to what is necessary for a home that hinders so many from establishing one. Filthy rooms are not necessary, nor 20, nor 15, nor 10, nor 5, nor 3. In the right way plant a table, and couch, and knife and fork, and a cup, and a chair, and you can raise a young paradise. Just start a home, on however small a scale, and it will grow. When King Cyrus was invited to dine with an humble friend, the king made the one condition of his coming that the only dish be one loaf of bread, and the most imperial satisfactions have sometimes banquet on the plainest. Do not be caught in the delusion of many thousands in postponing a home until they can have an expensive one. That idea is the devil's trap that catches men and women innumerable who will never have any home at all. Capitalists of America build plain homes for the people. Let this tenement house system, in which hundreds of thousands of the people of our cities are wallowing in the mire, be broken up by small homes, where people can have their own firesides and their own altar. In this great continent there is room enough for every man and woman to have a home. Morals and civilization and religion demand it. Small homes needed. We want done all over this land what George Peabody and Lady Burdett did in England, and some of the large manufacturers of this country have done for the villages and cities, in building small houses at cheap rents, so that the middle classes can have separate homes. They are the only class not provided for. The rich have their palaces, and the poor have their poorhouses, and criminals have their jails, but what about the honest middle classes, who are able and willing to work, and yet have small income? Let the capitalists, inspired of God and pure patriotism, rise and build whole streets of small residences. The labourer may have, at the close of the day, to walk or ride further than is desirable to reach it, but when he gets to his destination in the event he will find something worthy of being called by that glorious and impassioned and heaven-descended word, home. Something to save for. Young married man, as soon as you can buy such a place, even if you have to put on it a mortgage reaching from base to capstone. The much abused mortgage, which is ruin to a reckless man, to one prudent and provident is the beginning of a competency and a fortune, for the reason he will not be satisfied until he has paid it off, and all the household are put on stringent economies until then. Deny yourself all superfluities and all luxuries until you can say, everything in this house is mine, thank God, every timber, every brick, every foot of plumbing, every door sill. Do not have your children born in a boarding house, and do not yourself be buried from one. Have a place where your children can shout and sing and romp without being overhauled for the racket. Have a kitchen where you can do something toward the reformation of evil. Cook 1 Why and the lessening of this nation of dyspeptics. As Napoleon lost one of his great battles by an attack of indigestion, so many men have such a daily wrestle with the food swallowed that they have no strength left for the battle of life. And though your wife may know how to play on all musical instruments, and rival a prima donna, she is not well educated unless she can boil an Irish potato and broil a mutton chop, since the diet sometimes decides the fate of families and nations. Have a sitting room with at least one easy chair, even though you have to take tums at sitting in it, and books out of the public library or of your own purchase for the making of your family intelligent, and checkerboards and guessing matches, with an occasional blind man's buff, which is of all games my favorite. Rouse up your home with all styles of innocent milth, and gather up in your children's nature a reservoir of exuberance that will pour down refreshing streams when life gets parched, and the dark days come, and the lights go out, and the laughter is smothered into a sob. Christ in the home. First, last and all the time, have Christ in your home. Julius Caesar calmed the fears of an affrighted boatman who was rowing him in a stream by stating, "So long as Caesar is with you in the same boat no harm can happen." And whatever storm of adversity or bereavement or poverty may strike your home, all is well as long as you have Christ the King on board. Make your home so far-reaching in its influence that down to the last moment of your children's life you may hold them with a heavenly charm. At 76 years of age the Demosthenes of the American Senate lay dying at Washington, Henry Clay, of Kentucky. His pastor sat at his bedside, and the old man, eloquent after a long and exciting public life, transatlantic and CIS Atlantic, was back again in the scenes of his boyhood, and he kept saying in his dream over and over again, "My mother. Mother. Mother." May the parental influence we exert be not only potential but holy, and so the home on earth be the vestibule of our home in heaven, in which place may we all meet, father, mother, son, daughter, brother, sister, grandfather and grandmother, and grandchild, and the entire group of precious ones, of whom we must say in the words of transporting Charles Wesley, "One family we dwell in him, one church above, beneath, though now divided by the stream, the narrow stream of death, one army of the living God, to his command we bow, part of the host. Have crossed the flood, and part are crossing now." Easy divorce. What therefore God hath joined together let not man put. 19:6 That there are hundreds and thousands of infelicitous homes in America no one will doubt. If there were only one skeleton in the closet, that might be locked up and abandoned, but in many a home there is a skeleton in the hallway and a skeleton in all the apartments. Unhappily married are 2 words descriptive of many a homestead. It needs no orthodox minister to prove to a badly mated pair that there is a hell. They are there now. Sometimes a grand and gracious woman will be thus incarcerated, and her life will be a crucifixion, as was the case with Mrs. Sigourney, the great poetess and the great soul. Sometimes a consecrated man will be united to a fury, as was John Wesley, or united to a vixen, as was John Milton. Sometimes, and generally, both parties are to blame, and Thomas Carlyle is an intolerable scold, and his wife smokes and swears, and Froude, the historian, is mean enough, because of the shekels he gets for the manuscript, to pull aside the curtain from the lifelong squabble at Craig-and-Puttock and 5, Cheney Row. Some say that for the alleviation of all these domestic disorders of which we hear, easy divorce is a good prescription. God sometimes authorizes divorce as certainly as he authorizes marriage. I have just as much regard for one lawfully divorced as I have for one lawfully married. But you know and I know that wholesale divorce is one of our national scourges. I am not surprised at this when I think of the influences which have been abroad militating against the marriage relation. For many years the platforms of the country rang with talk about a free love millennium. There were meetings of this kind held in the Academy of Music, Brooklyn, Cooper Institute, New York, Tremont Temple, Boston, and all over the land. Some of the women who were most prominent in that movement have since been distinguished for great promiscuity of affection. Popular themes for such occasions were the tyranny of man, the oppression of the marriage relation, women's rights, and the affinities. Prominent speakers were women with short curls and short dress and very long tongue, everlastingly at war with God because they were created women, while on the platform sat meek men with soft accent and cowed demeanor, apologetic for masculinity, and holding the parasols while the termagant orators went on preaching the gospel of free love. That campaign of about 20 years set more devils in the marriage relation than will be exorcised in the next 50. Men and women went home from such meetings so permanently confused as to who were their wives and husbands that they never got out of the perplexity, and the criminal and the civil courts tried to disentangle the Iliad of woes, and this one got alimony, and that one got a limited divorce, and this mother kept the children on condition that the father could sometimes come and look at them, and these went into poorhouses, and those went into an insane asylum, and those went into dissolute public life, and all went to destruction. The mightiest war ever made against the marriage institution was that free love campaign, sometimes under one name and sometimes under another. Another influence that has warred upon the marriage relation has been polygamy in Utah. That is a stereotyped caricature of the marriage relation, and has poisoned the whole land. You might as well think that you can have an arm in a state of mortification and yet the whole body not be sickened, as to have those territories polygamized and yet the body of the nation not feel the putrefaction. Hear it, good men and women of America, that so long ago as 1862 a law was passed by Congress forbidding polygamy in the territories and in all the places where they had jurisdiction. 22 years have passed along and 5 administrations, armed with all the power of government, and having an army at their disposal, and yet the first brick has not been knocked from that fonrus of libertinism. Every new president in his inaugural has tickled that monster with the straw of condemnation, and every Congress has stultified itself in proposing some plan that would not work. Polygamy stands in Utah and in other of the territories today more entrenched, and more brazen, and more puissant, and more braggart, and more infernal, than at any time in its history. James Buchanan, a much abused man of his day, did more for the extirpation of this villainy than all the subsequent administrations have dared to do. Mr. Buchanan sent out an army, and although it was halted in its work, still he accomplished more than the subsequent administrations, which have done nothing but talk. I want the people of America to know that for 22 years we have had a positive law prohibiting polygamy in the territories. People are crying out for some new law, as though we had not an old law already with which that infamy could be swept into the perdition from which it smoked up. Polygamy in Utah has warred against the marriage relation throughout the land. It is impossible to have such an awful sewer of iniquity sending up its miasma, which is wafted by the winds north, south, east, and west, without the whole land being affected by it. Another influence that has warred against the marriage relation in this country has been apostulous literature, with its millions of sheets every week choked with stories of domestic wrongs, and infidelities, and massacres, and outrages, until it is a wonder to me that there are any decencies or any common sense left on the subject of marriage. One half of the newsstands of Brooklyn and New York and all our cities reeking with the filth. Now say some, we admit all these evils, and the only way to clear them out or correct them is by easy divorce. Well, before we yield to that cry, let us find out how easy it is now. I have looked over the laws of all the states, and I find that while in some states it is easier than in others, in every state it is easy. The state of Illinois through its legislature recites a long list of proper causes for divorce, and then closes up by giving to the courts the right to make a decree of divorce in any case where they deem it expedient. After that you are not surprised at the announcement that in one county of the state of Illinois, in 1 year, there were 833 divorces. If you want to know how easy it is, you have only to look over the records of the states. In Massachusetts 600 divorces in 1 year, in Maine 478 in 1 year, in Connecticut 401 divorces in 1 year, in the city of San Francisco 333 divorces in 1880, in New England in 1 year 2,113 divorces, and in 20 years in New England 20,000. Is that not easy enough? If the same ratio continue, the ratio of multiplied divorce and multiplied causes of divorce, we are not far from the time when our courts will have to set apart whole days for application, and all you will have to prove against a man will be that he left his slippers in the middle of the floor, and all you will have to prove against a woman will be that her husband's overcoat was buttonless. Causes of divorce doubled in a few years, doubled in France, doubled in England, and doubled in the United States. To show how very easy it is, I have to tell you that in Western Reserve, Ohio, the proportion of divorces to marriages celebrated is 1 to 11, in Rhode Island is 1 to 13, in Vermont is 1 to 14. Is not that easy enough? I want you to notice that frequency of divorce always goes along with the dissoluteness of society. Rome for 500 years had not one case of divorce. Those were her days of glory and virtue. Then the reign of vice began, and divorce became epidemic. If you want to know how rapidly the empire went down, ask Gibbon. Do you know how the reign of terror was introduced in France? By 20,000 cases of divorce in 1 year in Paris. What we want in this country and in all lands is that divorce be made more and more and more difficult. Then people before they enter that relation will be persuaded that there will probably be no escape from it except through the door of the sepulchre. Then they will pause on the verge of that relation until they are fully satisfied that it is best, and that it is right, and that it is happiest. Then we shall have no more marriage in fun. Then men and women will not enter the relation with the idea it is only a trial trip, and if they do not like it they can get out at the first landing. Then this whole question will be taken out of the frivolous into the tremendous, and there will be no more joking about the blossoms in a bride's hair than about the cypress on a coffin. What we want is that the Congress of the United States at this present session move for the changing the national constitution so that a law can be passed which shall be uniform all over the country, and what shall be right in one state shall be right in all the states, and what is wrong in one state will be wrong in all the states. How is it now? If a party in the marriage relation gets dissatisfied, it is only necessary to move to another state to achieve liberation from the domestic tie, and divorce is effected so easy that the first one party knows of it is by seeing it in the newspaper that Reverend Dr. Somebody, on the 14th of April, 1884, introduced into a new marriage relation a member of the household who went off on a pleasure excursion to Newport or a business excursion to Chicago. Married at the bride's house. No cards. There are states of the Union which practically put a premium upon the disintegration of the marriage relation, while there are other states, like our own New York State, that has the preeminent idiocy of making marriage lawful at 12 and 14 years of age. The Congress of the United States needs to move at the present session for a change of the national constitution, and then to appoint a committee, not made up of single gentlemen, but of men of families and their families in Washington, who shall prepare a good, honest, righteous, comprehensive, uniform law. That will control everything from Sandy Hook to Golden Horn. That will put an end to brokerages in marriage. That will send divorce lawyers into a decent business. That will set people agitated for many years on the question of how shall they get away from each other to planning how they can adjust themselves to the more or less unfavorable circumstances. More difficult divorce will put an estoppel to a great extent upon marriage as a financial speculation. There are men who go into the relation just as they go into Wall Street to purchase shares. The female to be invited into the partnership of wedlock is utterly unattractive, and in disposition a suppressed Vesuvius. Everybody knows it, but this masculine candidate for matrimonial orders, through the commercial agency or through the county records, finds out how much estate is to be inherited, and he calculates it. He thinks out how long it will be before the old man will die, and whether he can stand the refract 01Y temper until he does die, and then he enters the relation, for he says, if I cannot stand it, then through the divorce law I'll back out. That process is going on all the time, and men enter the relation without any moral principle, without any affection, and it is as much a matter of stock speculation as anything that transpired yesterday in Union Pacific, Wabash, and Delaware and Lackawanna. Now, suppose a man understood, as he ought to understand, that if he goes into that relation there is no possibility of his getting out, or no probability, he would be more slow to put his neck in the yoke. He should say to himself, rather than a Caribbean whirlwind with a whole fleet of shipping in its arms, give me a zephyr off fields of sunshine and gardens of peace. Rigorous divorce law will also hinder women from the fatal mistake of marrying men to reform them. If a young man by 25 years of age or 30 years of age has the habit of strong drink fixed on him, he is as certainly bound for a drunkard's grave as that a train starting out from Grand Central Depot at 8:00 tomorrow morning is bound for Albany. The train may not reach Albany, for it may be thrown from the track. The young man may not reach a drunkard's grave, for something may throw him off the iron track of evil habit, but the probability is that the train that starts tomorrow morning at 8:00 for Albany will get there, and the probability is that the young man who has the habit of strong drink fixed on him before 25 or 30 years of age will arrive at a drunkard's grave. She knows he drinks, although he tries to hide it by chewing cloves. Everybody knows he drinks. Parents warn, neighbors and friends wham. She will many him, she will reform him. If she is unsuccessful in the experiment, why then the divorce law will emancipate her, because habitual drunkenness is a cause for divorce in Indiana, Kentucky, Florida, Connecticut, and nearly all the states. So the poor thing goes to the altar of sacrifice. If you will show me the poverty-struck streets in any city, I will show you the homes of the women who married men to reform them. In one case out of 10,000 it may be a successful experiment. I never saw the successful experiment. But have a rigorous divorce law, and that woman will say, if I am affianced to Thartman it is for life, and if now in the ardour of his young love, and I am the prize to be won, he will not give up his cups. When he has won the prize, surely he will not give up his cups. And so that woman will say to the man, no, sir, you are already married to the club, and you are married to that evil habit, and so you are married twice, and you are a bigamist. Go. A rigorous divorce law will also do much to hinder hasty and inconsiderate marriages. Under the impression that one can be easily released, people enter the relation without inquiry and without reflection. Romance and impulse rule the day. Perhaps the only ground for the marriage compact is that she likes his looks and he admires the graceful way she passes around the ice cream at the picnic. It is all they know about each other. It is all the preparation for life. A man not able to pay his own board bill, with not $1 in his possession, will stand at the altar and take the loving hand, and say, with all my worldly goods I thee endow. A woman that could not make a loaf of bread to save her life will swear to cherish and obey. A Christian will many an atheist, and that always makes conjoined wretchedness, for if a man does not believe there is a God, he is neither to be trusted with $1 nor with your lifelong happiness. Having read much about love in a cottage, people brought up in ease will go and starve in a hovel. Runaway matches and elopements, 999 out of 1,000 of which mean death and hell, multiplying on all hands. You see them in every day's newspapers. Our ministers in this region have no defense such as they have in other cities, where the bans must be previously published and an officer of the law must give a certificate that all is right, so clergymen are left defenseless, and unite those who ought never to be united. Perhaps they are too young, or perhaps they are standing already in some domestic compact. By the wreck of 10,000 homes, by the holocaust of 10,000 sacrificed men and women, by the hearthstone of the family which is the cornerstone of the state, and in the name of that God who hath set up the family institution and who hath made the breaking of the marital oath the most appalling of all perjuries, I implore the Congress of the United States to make some righteous, uniform law for all the states and from ocean to ocean, on this subject of marriage and divorce. Advice to lovers. Let me say to the hundreds of young people in this house this morning, before you give your heart and hand in holy alliance, use all caution, inquire outside as to habits, explore the disposition, scrutinize the taste, question the ancestry, and find out the ambitions. Do not take the heroes and the heroines of cheap novels for a model. Do not put your lifetime happiness in the keeping of a man who has a reputation for being a little loose in morals, or in the keeping of a woman who dresses fast. Remember that while good looks are a kindly gift of God, wrinkles or accident may despoil them. Remember that Byron was no more celebrated for his beauty than for his depravity. Remember that Absalom's hair was not more splendid than his habits were despicable. Hear it, hear it. The only foundation for happy marriage that ever has been or ever will be, is good character. Ask father and mother's counsel in this most important step of your life. They are good advisers. They are the best friends you ever had. They made more sacrifices for you than anyone else ever did, and they will do more today for your happiness than any other people. Ask them, and, above all, ask God. I used to smile at John Brown of Haddington because when he was about to offer his hand and heart in marriage to one who became his lifelong companion, he opened the conversation by saying, "Let us pray." But I have seen so many shipwrecks on the sea of matrimony, I have made up my mind that John Brown of Haddington was right. A union formed in prayer will be a happy union, though sickness pale the cheek, and poverty empty the bread tray, and death open the small graves, and all the path of life be strewn with tombs, from the marriage altar with its wedding march and orange blossoms clear on down to the last farewell at that gate where Isaac and Rebekah, Abraham and Sarah, Adam and Eve, parted. And let me say to you who are in this relation, if you make one man or woman happy, you have not lived in vain. Christ says that what he is to the church you ought to be to each other, and if sometimes through difference of opinion or difference of disposition you make up your mind that your marriage was a mistake, patiently bear and forbear, remembering that life at the longest is short, and that for those who have been badly mated in this world, death will give quick and immediate bill of divorcement written in letters of green grass on quiet graves. And perhaps, my brother, my sister, perhaps you may appreciate each other better in heaven than you have appreciated each other on earth. In the farm ballads our American poet puts into the lips of a repentant husband after a life of married penetration these suggestive words. And when she dies I wish that she would be laid by me, and lying together in silence, perhaps we will agree. And if ever we meet in heaven, I would not think it queer if we love each other better because we quarrelled here. And let me say to those of you who are in happy married union, avoid first quarrels. Have no unexplained correspondence with former admirers, cultivate no suspicions, in a moment of bad temper do not n1 out and tell the neighbours, do not let any of those gadabouts of society unload in your house their baggage of gab and tittle-tattle, do not stand on your rights, learn how to apologise, do not be so proud, or so stubborn, or so devilish that you will not make up. Remember that the worst domestic misfortunes and most scandalous divorce cases started from little infelicities. The whole piled-up train of 10 rail cars telescoped and smashed at the foot of an embankment 100 feet down came to that catastrophe by getting 2 or 3 inches off the track. Some of the greatest domestic misfortunes and the widest resounding divorce cases have started from little misunderstandings that were allowed to go on until home, and respectability, and religion, and immortal soul went down in the crash. And, fellow citizens as well as fellow Christians, let us have a divine rage against anything that wars on the marriage state. Blessed institution! Instead of 2 arms to fight the battle of life, 4. Instead of 2 eyes to scrutinize the path of life, 4. Instead of 2 shoulders to lift the burden of life, 4. Twice the energy, twice the courage, twice the holy ambition, twice the probability of worldly success, twice the prospects of heaven. Into that matrimonial bower God fetches 2 souls. Outside the bower room for all contentions, and all bickerings, and all controversies, but inside that bower there is room for only one guest, the angel of love. Let that angel stand at the floral doorway of this Edenic bower with drawn sword to hew down the worst foe of that bower, easy divorce. And for every paradise lost may there be a paradise regained. And after we quit our home here may we have a brighter home in heaven, at the windows of which this moment are familiar faces watching for our arrival and wondering why so long we tarry. Maternity. Moreover, his mother made him a little coat, and brought it to him from year to year, when she came up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. 1 Samuel 2:19. The stories of Deborah and Abigail are very apt to discourage a woman's soul. She says within herself, "It is impossible that I ever can achieve any such grandeur of character, and I don't mean to try," as though a child should refuse to play the 8 notes because he cannot execute a William Tell. This Hannah of the text differs from the persons I just now named. She was an ordinary woman, with ordinary intellectual capacity, placed in the ordinary circumstances, and yet, by extraordinary piety, standing out before all the ages to come. The model Christian mother. Hannah was the wife of Elkanah, who was a person very much like herself, unromantic and plain, never having fought a battle or been the subject of a marvelous escape. Neither of them would have been called a genius. Just what you and I might be, that was Elkanah and Hannah. The brightest time in all the history of that family was the birth of Samuel. Although no star ran along the heavens pointing down to his birthplace, I think the angels of God stooped at the coming of so wonderful a prophet. As Samuel had been given in answer to prayer, Elkanah and all his family, save Hannah, started up to Shiloh to offer sacrifices of thanksgiving. The cradle where the child slept was altar enough for Hannah's grateful heart, but when the boy was old enough she took him to Shiloh and took 3 bullocks, and an ephah of flour, and a bottle of wine, and made offering of sacrifice unto the Lord, and there, according to a previous vow, she left him, for there he was to stay all the days of his life, and minister in the tabernacle. Years rolled on, and every year Hannah made with her own hands a garment for Samuel, and took it over to him. The lad would have got along well without that garment, for I suppose he was well clad by the ministry of the temple, but Hannah could not be contented unless she was all the time doing something for her darling boy. Moreover, his mother made him a little coat, and brought it to him from year to year, when she came up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. Hannah stands before you, then, in the first place, as an industrious mother. There was no need for her to work. Elkanah, her husband, was far from poor. He belonged to a distinguished family, for the Bible tells us that he was the son of Joam, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zoph. Who were they, you say? I do not know, but they were distinguished people, no doubt, or their names would not have been mentioned. Hannah might have seated herself with her family, and, with folded arms and dishevelled hair, read novels from year to year, if there had been any to read, but when I see her making that garment, and taking it over to Samuel, I know she is industrious from principle as well as from pleasure. God would not have a mother become a drudge or a slave, he would have her employ all the helps possible in this day in the rearing of her children. But Hannah ought never to be ashamed to be found making a coat for Samuel. Most mothers need no counsel in this direction. The wrinkles on their brow, the pallor on their cheek, the thimble mark on their finger, attest that they are faithful in their maternal duties. The bloom, and the brightness, and the vivacity of girlhood have given place for the grander dignity, and usefulness, and industry of motherhood. But there is a heathenish idea. Getting abroad in some of the families of Americans, there are mothers who banish themselves from the home circle. For 3/4 of their maternal duties they prove themselves incompetent. They are ignorant of what their children wear, and what their children eat, and what their children read. They introduce to irresponsible persons these young immortals, and allow them to be under influences which may cripple their bodies, or taint their purity, or spoil their manners, or destroy their souls. From the awkward cut of Samuel's coat you know his mother Hannah did not make it. Out from under flaming chandeliers, and off from imported carpets, and down the granite stairs, there has come a great crowd of children in this day, untrained, saucy, incompetent for all practical duties of life, ready to be caught in the first whirl of crime and sensuality. Indolent and unfaithful mothers will make indolent and unfaithful children. You cannot expect neatness and order in any house where the daughters see nothing but slatterness and upside-downativeness in their parents. Let Hannah be idle, and most snidely Samuel will grow up idle. Who are the industrious men in all our occupations and professions? Who are they managing the merchandise of the world, building the walls, tinning the roofs, weaving the carpets, making the laws, governing the nations, making the earth to quake, and heave, and roar, and rattle with the tread of gigantic enterprises? Who are they? For the most part they descended from industrious mothers, who, in the old homestead, used to spin their own yarn, and weave their own carpets, and plait their own door mats, and flag their own chairs, and do their own work. The stalwart men and the influential women of this day, 99 out of 100 of them, came from such an illustrious ancestry of hard knuckles and homespun. And who are these people in society, light as froth, blown even whither of temptation and fashion, the peddlers of filthy stories, the dancing jacks of political parties, the scum of society, the tavern lounging, the store infesting, the men of low wink, and filthy chuckle, and brass breastpins, and rotten associations? For the most part, they came from mothers idle and disgusting, the scandalmongers of society, going from house to house, attending to everybody's business but their own, believing in witches, and ghosts, and horseshoes to keep the devil out of the chum, and by a godless life setting their children on the very verge of hell. The mothers of Samuel Johnson, and of Alfred the Great, and Isaac Newton, and of St. Augustine, and of Richard Cecil, and of President Edwards, for the most part were industrious, hard-working mothers. Now, while I congratulate all Christian mothers upon the wealth and the modern science which may afford them all kinds of help, let me say that every mother ought to be observant of her children's walk, her children's behavior, her children's food, her children's looks, her children's companionships. However much help Hannah may have, I think she ought, every year, at least, make one garment for Samuel. The Lord have mercy on the man who is so unfortunate as to have had a lazy mother. 2 Again, Hannah stands before you as an intelligent mother. From the way in which she talked in this chapter, and from the way she managed this boy, you know she was intelligent. There are no persons in the community who need to be so wise and well informed as mothers. Oh, this work of culture in children for this world and the next. This child is timid, and it must be roused up and pushed out into activity. This child is forward, and he must be held back and tamed down into modesty and politeness. Rewards for one, punishments for another. That which will make George will ruin John. The rod is necessary in one case, while a frown of displeasure is more than enough in another. Whipping and a dark closet do not exhaust all the rounds of domestic discipline. There have been children who have grown up and gone to G101Y without ever having had their ears boxed. Oh, how much care and intelligence are necessary in the rearing of children! But in this day, when there are so many books on the subject, no parent is excusable in being ignorant of the best mode of bringing up a child. If parents knew more of dietetics, there would not be so many dyspeptic stomachs and weak nerves and inactive livers among children. If parents knew more of physiology, there would not be so many curved spines and cramped chests and inflamed throats and diseased lungs as there are among children. If parents knew more of art, and were in sympathy with all that is beautiful, there would not be so many children coming out in the world with boorish proclivities. If parents knew more of Christ, and practiced more of his religion, there would not be so many little feet already standing on the wrong road, and all around us voices of riot and blasphemy would not come up with such ecstasy of infernal triumph. The eaglets in the eyrie have no advantages over the eaglets of 1,000 years ago. The kids have no superior way of climbing up the rocks than the old goats taught hundreds of years ago. The whelps know no more now than did the whelps of ages ago. They are taught no more by the lions of the desert, but it is a shame that in this day, when there are so many opportunities of improving ourselves in the best manner of cultivating children, that so often there is no more advancement in this respect than there has been among the kids and the eaglets and the whelps. Ill again, Hannah stands before you as a Christian mother. From her prayers and from the way she consecrated her boy to God, I know that she was good. A mother may have the finest culture, the most brilliant surroundings, but she is not fit for her duties unless she be a Christian mother. There may be well-read libraries in the house, and exquisite music in the parlor, and the canvases of the best artists adorning the walls, and the wardrobe be crowded with tasteful apparel, and the children be wonderful for their attainments, and make the house ring with laughter and innocent mirth, but there is something woeful looking in that house if it be not also the residence of a Christian mother. I bless God that there are not many prayerless mothers, not many of them. The weight of the responsibility is so great that they feel the need of a divine hand to help, and a divine voice to comfort, and a divine heart to sympathize. Thousands of mothers have been led into the kingdom of God by the hands of their little children. There were hundreds of mothers who would not have been Christians had it not been for the prattle of their little ones. Standing some day in the nursery, they bev out themselves, "This child God has given me to raise for eternity. What is my influence upon it? Not being a Christian myself, how can I ever expect him to become a Christian? Lord, help me." Are there anxious mothers who know nothing of the infinite help of religion? Then I commend to them Hannah, the pious mother of Samuel. Do not think it is absolute lie impossible that your children may come up iniquitous. Out of just such fair brows and bright eyes, and soft hands, and innocent hands, crime gets its victims, extirpating purity from the hen, and rubbing out the smoothness from the brow, and quenching the lustre of the eye, and shrivelling up and poisoning and putrefying and scathing and scalding and blasting and burning with shame and woe. Every child is a bundle of tremendous possibilities, and whether that child shall come forth to life, its heart attuned to the eternal harmonies, and, enter a life of usefulness on earth, go to a life of joy in heaven, or whether across it shall jar eternal discords, and, after a life of wrongdoing on earth, it shall go to a home of impenetrable darkness and an abyss of immeasurable plunge, is being decided by nursery song and Sabbath lesson and evening prayer and walk and ride and look and frown and smile. Oh, how many children in glory, crowding all the battlements, and lifting a million-voiced hosanna, brought to God through Christian parentage. 120 clergymen were together, and they were telling their experience and their ancestry, and of the 120 clergymen, how many of them, do you suppose, assigned as the means of their conversion the influence of a Christian mother? 100 out of the 120. Philip Doddridge was brought to God by the scripture lesson on the Dutch tiles of a chimney fireplace. The mother thinks she is only rocking a child, but at the same time she may be rocking the fate of nations, rocking the glories of heaven. The same maternal power that may lift the child up may press a child down. A daughter came to a worldly mother and said she was anxious about her sins, and she had been praying all night. The mother said, "Stop praying. I don't believe in praying. Get over all these religious notions and I'll give you a dress that will cost $500, and you may wear it next week to that party." The daughter took the dress, and she moved in the gay circle, the gayest of all the gay, that night, and sure enough all the religious impressions were gone and she stopped praying. A few months after she came to die, and in her closing moment said, "Mother, I wish you would bring me that dress that cost $500. The mother thought it a very strange request, but she brought it to please the dying child. "Now," said the daughter, "Mother, hang that dress on the foot of my bed," and the dress was hung there, on the foot of the bed. Then the dying girl got up on one elbow and looked at her mother, and then pointed to the dress, and said, "Mother, that dress is the price of my soul." Oh, what a momentous thing it is to be a mother! For again, and lastly, Hannah stands before you the rewarded mother. For all the coats she made for Samuel, for all the prayers she offered for him, for the discipline exerted over him, she got abundant compensation in the piety and the usefulness and the popularity of her son Samuel, and that is TNLE in all ages. Every mother gets full pay for all the prayers and tears in behalf of her children. That man useful in commercial life, that man prominent in a profession, that master mechanic, why, every step he takes in life has an echo of gladness in the old heart that long ago taught him to be a Christian, and heroic and earnest. The story of what you have done, or what you have written, of the influence you exerted, has gone back to the old homestead, for there is someone always ready to carry good tidings, and that stow makes the needle in the old mother's tremulous hand fly quicker, and the flail in the father's hand come down on the barn floor with a vigorous thump. Parents love to hear good news from their children. Do you send them good news always? Look out for the young man who speaks of his father as the governor, the squire, or the old chap. Look out for the young woman who calls her mother her maternal ancestor or the old woman. The eye that mocketh at his father, and refuseth to obey his mother, the ravens of the valley shall pick it out, and the young eagles shall eat it. God grant that all these parents may have the great satisfaction of seeing their children grow up Christians. But, oh! The pang of that mother, who, after a life of street gadding and gossip retailing, hanging on the children the fripperies and follies of this world, sees those children tossed out on the sea of life like foam on the wave, nonentities in a world where only bravery and stalwart character can stand the shock. But blessed be the mother who looks upon her children as sons and daughters of the Lord Almighty. Oh! The satisfaction of Hannah in seeing Samuel serving at the altar, of Mother Eunice in seeing her Timothy learned in the Scriptures. That is the mother's recompense, to see children coming up useful in the world, reclaiming the lost, healing the sick, pitying the ignorant, earnest and useful in every sphere. That throws a new light back on the old family Bible whenever she reads it, and that will be ointment to soothe the aching limbs of decrepitude, and light up the closing hours of life's day with the glories of an autumnal sunset. There she sits, the old Christian mother, ripe for heaven. Her eyesight is almost gone, but the splendors of the celestial city kindle up her vision. The grey light of heaven's mom has struck through the grey locks which are folded back over the wrinkled temples. She stoops very much now under the burden of care she used to carry for her children. She sits at home, too old to find her way to the house of God, but while she sits there, all the past comes back, and the children that 40 years ago tripped around her armchair with their griefs and joys and sorrows, those children are gone now. Some caught up into a better realm, where they shall never die, and others out in the broad world, testing the excellency of a Christian mother's discipline. Her last days are full of peace, and calmer and sweeter will her spirit become, until the gates of life shall lift and let in the worn-out pilgrim into a Tamil spring-tide and youth, where the limbs never ache, and the eyes never grow dim, and the staff of the exhausted and decrepit pilgrim shall become the palm of the immortal athlete. The children's patrimony. Whose son art thou, thou young 1758? Never was there a more unequal fight than that between David and Goliath. David 5 feet high, Goliath 10. David a shepherd boy, brought up amid rural scenes, Goliath a warrior by profession. Goliath a mountain of braggadocio, David a marvel of humility. Goliath armed with an iron spear, David armed with a sling with smooth stones from the brook. But you are not to despise these latter weapons. There was a regiment of slingers in the Assyrian army and a regiment of slingers in the Egyptian army, and they made terrible execution, and they could cast a stone with as much precision and force as now can be hurled shot or shell. The Greeks in their army had slingers who would throw leaden plummets inscribed with the irritating words, "Take this." So it was a mighty weapon David employed in that famous combat. A Jewish rabbi says that the probability is that Goliath was in such contempt for David, that in a paroxysm of laughter he threw his head back, and his helmet fell off, and David saw the uncovered forehead, and his opportunity had come, and taking his sling and swinging it around his head 2 or 3 times, and aiming at that uncovered forehead, he cnlshed it in like an egg-shell. The battle over, behold a tableau colon. King Saul sitting, little David standing, his fingers clutched into the hair of decapitated Goliath. As Saul sees David standing there holding in his hand the ghastly, reeking, staring trophy, evidence of the complete victory over God's enemies, the king wonders what parentage was honored by such heroism, and in my text he asks David his pedigree, "Whose son art thou, thou young man?" The king saw what you and I see, that this question of heredity is a mighty question. The longer I live, the more one believe in blood. Good blood, bad blood, proud blood, humble blood, honest blood, thieving blood, heroic blood, cowardly blood. The tendency may skip a generation or two, but it is sure to come out, as in a little child you sometimes see a similarity to a great-grandfather whose picture hangs on the wall. That the physical and mental and moral qualities are inheritable is patent to anyone who keeps his eyes open. The similarity is so striking sometimes as to be amusing. Great families, regal or literary, are apt to have the characteristics all down through the generations, and what is more perceptible in such families may be seen on a smaller scale in all families. 1,000 years have no power to obliterate the difference. Royal rascals. The large lip of the House of Austria is seen in all the generations, and is called the Habsburg lip. The House of Stuart always means in all generations cruelty and bigotry and sensuality. Witness Queen of Scots. Witness Charles I and Charles II. Witness James I and James II. And all the other scoundrels of that imperial line. Scottish blood means persistence, English blood means reverence for the ancient, Welsh blood means religiosity, Danish blood means fondness for the sea, Indian blood means roaming disposition, Celtic blood means fervidity, Roman blood means conquest. The Jewish facility for accumulation you may trace clear back to Abraham, of whom the Bible says he was rich in silver and gold and cattle, and to Isaac and Jacob, who had the same family characteristics. Some families are characterized by longevity, and they have a tenacity of life positively Methuselish. Others are characterized by Goliathian stature, and you can see it for 1 generation, 2 generations, 5 generations, in all the generations. Vigorous theology runs on in the line of the Alexanders. Tragedy runs on in the family of the Kembles. Literature runs on in the line of the Trollops. Philanthropy runs on in the line of the Wilberforce. Statesmanship runs on in the line of the Adamses. Henry and Catherine of Navarre are religious, all their families religious. The celebrated family of the Cozzini, all mathematicians. The celebrated family of the Medici, grandfather, son and Catherine, all remarkable for keen intellect. The celebrated family of Gustavus Adolphus, all warriors. This law of heredity ascends itself without reference to social or political condition, for you sometimes find the ignoble in high place and the honourable in obscure place. A descendant of Edward I, a toll-gatherer. A descendant of Edward Ill. A doorkeeper. A descendant of the Duke of Northumberland, a trunk-maker. Some of the mightiest families of England are extinct, while some of those most honoured in the peerage go back to an ancestry of hard knuckles and rough exterior. This law of heredity entirely independent of social or political condition. Then you find avarice and jealousy and sensuality and fraud having full swing in some families. The violent temper of Frederick William is the inheritance of Frederick the Great. It is not a theory to be set forth by worldly philosophy only, but by divine authority. Do you not remember how the Bible speaks of a chosen generation, of the generation of the righteous, of the generation of vipers, of an untoward generation, of a stubborn generation, of the iniquity of the past visited upon the children unto the 3rd and 4th generation? So that the text comes today with the force of a projectile hurled from mightiest catapult, whose son art thou, thou young man? Well, says someone, that theory discharges me from all responsibility. Born of sanctified parents we are bound to be good and we cannot help ourselves. Born of unrighteous parentage we are bound to be evil and we cannot help ourselves. 2 inaccuracies. As much as if you should say, the centripetal force in nature has a tendency to bring everything to the center, and therefore all things come to the center. The centrifugal force in nature has a tendency to throw out everything to the periphery, and therefore everything will go out to the periphery. You know as well as I know that you can make the centripetal overcome the centrifugal, and you can make the centrifugal overcome the centripetal. As when there is a mighty tide of good in a family that may be overcome by determination to evil, as in the case of Aaron Burr, the libertine, who had for father President Burr, the consecrated, as in the case of Pierpont Edwards, the scourge of New York society 70 years ago, who had a Christian ancestry, while on the other hand some of the best men and women of this day are those who have come of an ancestry of which it would not be courteous to speak in their presence. Your duty. The practical and useful object of this sermon is to show to you that if you have come of a Christian ancestry, then you are solemnly bound to preserve and develop the glorious inheritance, or if you have come of a depraved ancestry, then it is your duty to brace yourself against the evil tendency by all prayer and Christian determination, and you are to find out what are the family frailties, and in arming the castle put the strongest guard at the weakest gate. With these smooth stones from the brook I hope to strike you, not where David struck Goliath, in the head, but where Nathan struck David, in the heart. Whose son art thou, thou young man? There is something in the periodical holidays to bring up the old folks. Sometime in the winter holiday, when we are accustomed to gather our families together, old times have come back again, and our thoughts have been set to the tune of Auld Lang Syne. The old folks were so busy at such times in making us happy, and perhaps on less resource made their sons and daughters happier than you on larger resource are able to make your sons and daughters happy. The snow lay 2 feet above their graves, but they shook off the white blankets and mingled in the holiday festivities, the same wrinkles, the same stoop of shoulder under the weight of age, the same old style of dress or coat, the same smile, the same tones of voice. I hope you remember them before they went away. If not, I hope there are those who have recited to you what they were, and that there may be in your house some article of dress or furniture with which you associate their memories. I want to arouse the most sacred memories of your Helt while I make the impassioned interrogator in regard to your pedigree, whose son art thou, thou young man, L. First, I accost all those who are descended of a Christian ancestry. I do not ask if your parents were perfect. There are no perfect people now, and I do not suppose there were any perfect people then. Perhaps there was sometimes too much blood in their eye when they chastised you. But from what I know of you, you got no more than you deserved, and perhaps a little more chastisement would have been salutary. But you are willing to acknowledge, I think, that they wanted to do right. From what you overheard in conversations, and from what you saw at the family altar and at neighborhood obsequies, you know that they had invited God into their heart and life. There was something that sustained those old people supernaturally. You have no doubt about their destiny. You expect if you ever get to heaven to meet them as certainly as you expect to meet the Lord Jesus Christ. That early association has been a charm for you. There was a time when you got right up from a house of iniquity and walked out into the fresh air because you thought your mother was looking at you. You have never been very happy in sin because of a sweet old face that would present itself. Tremulous voices from the past accosted you until they were seemingly audible, and you looked around to see who spoke. There was an estate not mentioned in the last will and testament, a vast estate of prayer and holy example and Christian entreaty and glorious memory. The survivors of the family gathered to hear the will read, and this was to be kept, and that was to be sold, and it was share and share alike. But there was an unwritten MLL. That reads something like this: in the name of God, Amen. I, being of sound mind, bequeath to my children all my prayers for their salvation, I bequeath to them all the results of a lifetime's toil, I bequeath to them the Christian religion which has been so much comfort to me, and I hope may be solace for them, I bequeath to them a hope of reunion when the partings of life are over, share and share alike may they have in eternal riches. I bequeath to them the wish that they may avoid my errors and copy anything that may have been worthy. In the name of the God who made me, and the Christ who redeemed me, and the Holy Ghost who sanctifies me, I make this my last will and testament. Witness, all ye hosts of heaven. Witness, time, witness, eternity. Signed, sealed, and delivered in this our dying hour. Father and Mother. You did not get that will proved at the surrogate's office, but I take it out today and I read it to you. I take it out of the alcoves of your heart, I shake the dust off it. I ask you, will you accept that inheritance, or will you break the will? O ye of Christian ancestry, you have a responsibility vast beyond all measurement. God will not let you off with just being as good as ordinary people when you had such extraordinary advantage. Ought not a flower planted in a hothouse be more thrifty than a flower planted outside in the storm? Ought not a factory tummed by the Housatonic do more work than a factory tummed by a thin and shallow mountain stream? Ought not you of great early opportunity be better than those who had a cradle unblessed? The capital account. A father sets his son up in business. He keeps an account of all the expenditures. So much for store fixtures, so much for rent, so much for this, so much for that, and all the items aggregated, and the father expects the son to give an account. Your heavenly Father charges against you all the advantages of a pious ancestry, so many prayers, so much Christian example, so many kind entreaties, all these gracious influences one tremendous aggregate, and he asks you for an account of it. Ought not you to be better than those who had no such advantages? Better have been a foundling picked up off the city commons than with such magnificent inheritance of consecration to tum out indifferently. Ought not you, my brother, to be better, having had Christian nurture, than that man who can tnlly say this momming, the first word I remember my father speaking to me was an oath, the first time I remember my father taking hold of me was in wrath. I never saw a Bible till I was 10 years of age, and then I was told it was a pack of lies. The first 20 years of my life I was associated with the vicious. I seemed to be walled in by sin and death. Now, my brother, ought you not, I leave it as a matter of fairness with you, ought you not to be far better than those who had no early Christian influence? Standing as you do between the generation that is past and the generation that is to come, are you going to pass the blessing on, or are you going to have your life the gulf in which the tide of blessings shall drop out of sight forever? You are the trustee of piety in that ancestral line, and are you going to augment or squander that solemn TN1ST fund? Are you going to disinherit your sons and daughters of the heirloom which your parents left you? All. That cannot be possible, that cannot be possible that you are going to take such a position as that. You are very careful about the life insurances, and careful about the deeds, and careful about the mortgages, and careful about the title of your property, because when you step off the stage you want your children to get it all. Are you making no provision that they shall get grandfather and grandmother's religion? Oh, what a last will and testament you are making, my brother! In the name of God, Amen. I, being of sound mind, make this my last will and testament. I bequeath to my children all the money I ever made and all the houses I own, but I disinherit them, I rob them of the ancestral grace and the Christian influence that I inherited. I have squandered that on my own worldliness. Share and share alike must they in the misfortune and the everlasting outrage. Signed, sealed and delivered in the presence of God and men and angels and devils and all the generations of earth and heaven and hell, March, 1886. O ye of highly favoured ancestry, wake up this morning to a sense of your opportunity and your responsibility. I think there must be an old cradle, or a fragment of a cradle somewhere that could tell a story of midnight supplication in your behalf. Where is the old rocking chair in which you were sung to sleep with the holy nursery rhyme? Where is the old clock that ticked away the moments of that sickness on that awful night when there were but 3 of you awake, you and God and Mother? Is there not an old staff in some closet? Is there not an old family Bible on some shelf that seems to address you, saying, my son, my daughter, how can you reject that God who so kindly dealt with us all our lives and to whom we commended you in our prayers living and dying? By the memory of the old homestead, by the family altar, by our dying pillow, by the graves in which our bodies sleep while our spirits hover, we beg you to turn over a new leaf for the new year. 01-1 the power of ancestral piety, well illustrated by a young man of New York who attended a prayer meeting one night and asked for prayer, and then went home and wrote down these words, an entry in a diary. 25 years ago tonight my mother went to heaven, my beautiful, blessed mother, and I have been alone, tossed up and down upon the billows of life's tempestuous ocean. Shall I ever go to heaven? She told me I must meet her in heaven. When she took her boy's hand in hers and turned her gentle, loving eyes on me, and gazed earnestly and long into my face, and then lifted them to heaven in that last prayer, she prayed that I might meet her in heaven. I wonder if we'll ever shall. My mother's prayers. Oh, my sweet, blessed mother's prayers. Did ever boy have such a mother as I had? For 25 years I have not heard her pray until tonight. I have heard all her prayers over again. They have had, in fact, a terrible resurrection. 011, how she was wont to pray. She prayed as they prayed tonight, so earnest, so importunate, so believing. Shall I ever be a Christian? She was a Christian. Oh, how bright and pure and happy was her life. She was a cheerful and happy Christian. There is my mother's Bible. I have not opened it for years. Did she believe I could ever neglect her precious Bible? She surely thought I would read it much and often. How often has she read it to me? Blessed Mother, did you pray in vain for your boy? It shall not be in vain. All. No, no, it shall not be in vain. I will pray for myself. Who has sinned against so much instruction as I have? Against so many precious prayers put up to heaven for me by one of the most lovely, tender, pious, confiding, trusting of mothers in her heavenly Father's care and grace? She never doubted. She believed. She always prayed as if she did. My Bible, my mother's Bible and my conscience teach what I am and what I have made myself. Oh, the bitter pangs of an accusing conscience. I need a Saviour mighty to save. I must seek Him. I will. I am on the sea of existence, and I can never get off from it. I am afloat. No anchor, no rudder, no compass, no book of instructions, for I have put them all away from me. Saviour of the perishing, save or I perish. Do you wonder that the next day he arose in a prayer meeting and said, Brethren, I stand before you a monument of God's amazing mercy and goodness, forever blessed be His holy name, all I have and all I am I consecrate to Jesus, my Saviour and my God. Oh, the power of ancestral prayer! Hear it! Hear it! But I turn for a moment to those who had evil parentage, and I want to tell you that the highest thrones in heaven and the mightiest triumphs and the brightest crowns will be for those who had evil parentage, but who by the grace of God conquered. As useful, as splendid a gentleman as I know of today had for father a man who died blaspheming God until the neighbours had to put their fingers in their ears to shut out the horror. One of the most consecrated and useful Christian ministers of today was born of a drunken horse jockey. Tide of evil tremendous in some families. It is like Niagara Rapids, and yet men have clung to a rock and been rescued. There is a family in New York whose wealth has rolled up into many millions that was founded by a man who, after he had vast estates, sent back a paper of tax because they were 2 cents more than he expected. Grip and grind and gouge in the 4th generation, I suppose it will be grip and grind and gouge in the 20th generation. The thirst for intoxicants has burned down through the arteries of 150 years. Pugnacity or combativeness characterize other families. Sometimes one form of evil, sometimes another form of evil. But it may be resisted. It has been resisted. If the family frailty be avarice, cultivate unselfishness and charity, and teach your children never to eat an apple without offering somebody else half of it. Is the family frailty combativeness? Keep out of the company of quick-tempered people, and never answer an impertinent question until you have counted 100 both ways, and after you have written an angry letter keep it a week before you send it, and then bum it up. Is the family frailty, timidity and cowardice? Cultivate backbone, read the biography of brave men like Joshua or Paul, and see if you cannot get a little iron in your blood. Find out what the family frailty is, and set body, mind and soul in battle array. Conquer your will. I think the genealogical table was put in the first chapter of the New Testament, not only to show our Lord's pedigree, but to show that a man may rise up in an ancestral line and beat back successfully all the influences of bad heredity. See in that genealogical table that good King Asa came of vile King Abiah. See in that genealogical table that Joseph and Mary and the most illustrious being that ever touched our world, or ever will touch it, had in their ancestral lines scandalous Rehoboam and Tamar and Bathsheba. If this world is ever to be Edenized, and it will be, all the infected families of the earth are to be regenerated, and there will someone arise in each family line and open a new genealogical table. There will be some Joseph in the line to reverse the evil influence of Rehoboam, and there will be some Mary in the line to reverse the evil influence of Bathsheba. Perhaps the star of hope may point down to your manger. Perhaps you are to be the hero or the heroine that is to put down the brakes and stop that long train of genealogical tendencies and switch it off on another track from that on which it has been running for a century. You do that, and I will promise you as fine a palace as the architects of heaven can build, the archway inscribed with the words, more than conqueror. Adopted children. But whatever your heredity, let me say, you may be sons and daughters of the Lord God Almighty. Estranged children from the homestead come back through the open gate of adoption. There is royal blood in our veins. There are crowns in our escutcheon. Our father is king. Our brother is king. We may be kings and queens unto God forever. Come and sit down on the ivory bench of the palace. Come and wash in the fountains that fall into the basins of crystal and alabaster. Come and look out of the upholstered window upon gardens of azalea and amaranth. Hear the full burst of the orchestra while you banquet with potentates and victors. Oh, when the text sweeps backward, let it not stop at the cradle that rocked your infancy, but at the cradle that rocked the first world, and when the text sweeps forward, let it not stop at your grave, but at the throne on which you may reign forever and ever. Whose son art thou, thou young man? Son of God. Heir of mortality. Take your inheritance, the mother of all, and the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept, and he took one of his ribs, and closed up the flesh instead thereof, and the rib, which the Lord God had taken from man, made he a woman, and brought her unto the man. Genesis 2:21-22. It is the first Saturday afternoon in the world's existence. Ever since sunrise Adam has been watching the brilliant pageantry of wings and scales and clouds, and in his first lessons in zoology and ornithology and ichthyology he has noticed that the robins fly the air in tours, and that the fish swim the water in tours, and that the lions walk the fields in tours, and in the warm redolence of that Saturday afternoon he falls off into slumber, and as if by allegory to teach all ages that the greatest of earthly blessings is sound sleep, this paradisaical somnolence ends with the discovery on the part of Adam of her corresponding intelligence. Just landed on the new planet. Of the mother of all the living I speak, Eve, the first, the fairest and the best. I make me a garden. I inlay the paths with mountain moss, and I border them with pearls from Ceylon and diamonds from Golconda. Here and there are fountains tossing in the sunlight, and ponds that ripple under the paddling of the swans. I gather me lilies from the Amazon, and orange groves from the tropics, and tamarinds from Boyas. There are woodbine and honeysuckle climbing over the wall, and starred spaniels sprawling themselves on the grass. I invite amid these trees the larks, and the brown thrushes, and the robins, and all the brightest birds of heaven, and they stir the air with infinite chirp and carol. And yet the place is a desert filled with darkness and death as compared with the residence of the woman. Of the text, the subject of my morning story. Never since have such skies looked down through such leaves into such waters. Never has river wave had such curve and sheen and bank as it owned the Pison, the Havila, the Jihan, and the Hidakal, even the pebbles being bdellium and onyx stone? What fruits, with no curculio to sting the rind? What flowers, with no slug to gnaw the root? What atmosphere, with no frost to chill and with no heat to consume? Bright colors tangled in the grass, perfume in the air, music in the sky. Birds warble and trees hum, and waterfalls dash. Great scene of gladness and love and joy. Right there under a bower of leaf and vine and shrub occurred the first marriage. Adam took the hand of this immaculate daughter of God and pronounced the ceremony when he said, "Bone of my bone, and flesh of my flesh." A forbidden tree stood in the midst of that exquisite park. Eve, sauntering out one day alone, looks up at the tree and sees the beautiful fruit, and wonders if it is sweet, and wonders if it is sour, and standing there, says, "Think I will just put my hand upon the fruit, it will do no damage to the tree, I will not take the flit to eat, but I will just take it down to examine it." She examined the flit. She said, "I do not think there can be any harm in my just breaking the rind of it." She put the flit to her teeth, she tasted, she invited Adam also to taste of the fruit, the door of the world opened, and the monster sin entered. Let the heavens gather blackness, and the winds sigh on the bosom of the hills, and cavern and desert and earth and sky join in one long, deep, hell-rending howl, the world is lost. Beasts that before were harmless and full of play put forth claw, and sting, and tooth, and tusk. Birds whet their beak for prey. Clouds troop in the sky. Sharp thorns shoot up through the soft grass. Blastings on the leaves. All the chords of that great harmony are snapped. Upon the brightest home this world ever saw our first parents turned their back and led forth on a path of sorrow the broken-hind myriads of a mind race. Do you not see, in the first place, the danger of a poorly regulated inquisitiveness? She wanted to know how the fruit tasted. She found out, but 6,000 years have deplored that unhealthful curiosity. Healthy curiosity has done a great deal for letters, for art, for science and for religion. It has gone down into the depths of the earth with the geologist and seen the first chapter of Genesis written in the book of nature illustrated with engraving on rock, and it stood with the antiquarian while he blew the numpet of resurrection over buried Herculaneum and Pompeii, until from their sepulchre there came up shaft and terrace and amphitheatre. Healthful curiosity has enlarged the telescopic vision of the astronomer until worlds hidden in the distant heavens have trooped forth and have joined the choir praising the Lord. Planet weighed against planet and wildest comet lassoed with resplendent law. Healthful curiosity has gone down and found the tracks of the eternal God in the polypi and the starfish under the sea and the majesty of the great Jehovah encamped under the gorgeous curtains of the dahlia. It has studied the spots on the sun, and the larvae in a beech leaf, and the light under firefly's wing, and the terrible eye glance of a condor pitching from Chimborazo. It has studied the myriads of animalculae that make up the phosphorescence in a ship's wake, and the mighty maze of suns, and spheres, and constellations, and galaxies that blaze on in the march of God. Healthful curiosity has stood by the inventor until forces that were hidden for ages came to wheels, and levers, and shafts, and shuttles, forces that fly the air, or swim the sea, or cleave the mountain until the earth jars, and roars, and rings, and crackles, and booms, with strange mechanism, and ships with nostrils of hot steam and yokes of fire draw the continents together. I say nothing against healthful curiosity. May it have other Leyden jars, and other electric batteries, and other voltaic piles, and other magnifying glasses with which to storm the barred castles of the natural world until it shall surrender its last secret. We thank God for the geological curiosity of Professor Hitchcock, and the mechanical curiosity of Liebig, and the zoological curiosity of Cuvier, and the inventive curiosity of Edison, but we must admit that unhealthful and irregular inquisitiveness has rushed thousands and tens of thousands into Nlin. Eve just tasted the flit. She was curious to find out how it tasted, and that curiosity blasted her. And blasted all nations. So there are clergy in this day inspired by unhealful inquisitiveness who have tried to look through the keyhole of God's mysteries, mysteries that were barred and bolted from all human inspection, and they have wrenched their whole moral nature out of joint by trying to pluck fillet from branches beyond their reach, or have come out on limbs of the tree from which they have tumbled into ruin without remedy. 1,000 trees of religious knowledge from which we may eat and get advantage, but from certain trees of mystery, how many have plucked therein? Election, free agency, Trinity, resurrection. In the discussion of these subjects hundreds and thousands of people in the soul. There are men who have actually been kept out of the kingdom of heaven because they could not understand who Melchizedek was not. Oh, how many have been destroyed by an unhealful inquisitiveness! It is seen in all directions. There are those who stand with the eye stare and mouth gape of curiosity. They are the first to hear a falsehood, builded another story high and 2 wings to it. About other people's apparel, about other people's business, about other people's financial condition, about other people's affairs, they are over anxious. Ever, why a nice piece of gossip stops at their door, and they fatten and luxuriate in the endless round of the great world of tittle-tattle. They invite and sumptuously entertain at their house Colonel Twaddle and Esquire chit-chat and Governor small talk. Whoever hath an innuendo, whoever hath a scandal, whoever hath a valuable secret, let him come and sacrifice it to this goddess of splutter. Thousands of Adams and Eves do nothing but eat fillet that does not belong to them. Men quite well known as mathematicians failing in this computation of moral algebra, good sense plus good breeding, minus curiosity, equals minding your own affairs. Then, how many young men through curiosity go through the whole realm of French novels, to see whether they are really as bad as moralists have pronounced them? They come near the verge of the precipice just to look off. They want to see how far it really is down, but they lose their balance while they look, and fall into remediless ruin, or, catching themselves, clamber up, bleeding and ghastly, on the rock, gibbering with curses or groaning ineffectual prayer. By all means encourage healthful inquisitiveness, by all means discourage ill-regulated curiosity. Treacherous fruit. The subject of the morning also impresses me with the fact that fruits that are sweet to the taste may afterward produce great agony. Forbidden fillet for Eve was so pleasant she invited her husband also to take of it, but her banishment from paradise, and 6,000 years of sorrow, and wretchedness, and war, and woe paid for that luxury. Sin may be very sweet at the stall, and it may induce great wretchedness afterward. The cup of sin is sparkling at the top, but there is death at the bottom. Intoxication has great exhilaration for a while, and it fillips the blood, and it makes a man see 5 stars where others can see only 1 star, and it makes the poor man rich, and turns cheeks which are white red as roses. But what about the dreams that come after, when he seems falling from great heights, or is prostrate by other fancied disasters, and the perspiration stands on the forehead, the night dew of everlasting darkness, and he is ground under the horrible hoof of nightmares, shrieking with lips that crackle with all-consuming torture? Rejoice, O young man, in thy youth, and let thy heart cheer thee in the days of thy youth, but know thou, that for all these things God will bring thee into judgment. Sweet at the start, horrible at the last. Go into that hall of revelry, where ungodly mirth staggers and blasphemes. Listen to the senseless gabble, see the last trace of intelligence dashed out from faces made in God's own image. Aha! Aha, says the roistering inebriate, this is joy for you, fill high your cups, my boys. I drink to my wife's misery and my children's rags and my God's defiance. And he knows not that a fiend stirs the goblet in his hand and that adders uncoil from the dregs and thrust their forked tongues hissing through the froth on the rim. Perdition bought for a 6pence. The Philistines jeered and laughed and shouted at Samson. Oh, they wanted him to make sport for them, and he made sport for them. How bright and gay was the scene for a little while. After a while the giant puts one hand against this pillar, and the other hand against this pillar, and bows himself, and 3,000 merry makers are mashed like grapes in a winepress. Sin rapturous at the start, awful at the last. That one Edenic transgression did not seem to be much, but it stnlck a blow which to this day makes the earth stagger like an ox under a butcher's bludgeon. To find out the consequences of that one sin, you would have to compel the world to throw open all its prison doors and display the crime, and throw open all its hospitals and display the disease, and throw open all the insane asylums and show the wretchedness, and open all the sepulchres and show the dead, and open all the doors of the lost world and show the damned. That one Edenic transgression stretched cords of misery across the heart of the world and struck them with dolorous wailing, and it has seated the plagues upon the air and the shipwrecks upon the tempest, and fastened like a leech famine to the heart of the sick and dying nations. Beautiful at the start, horrible at the last. Oh, how many have experienced, and there are those who are votaries of pleasure. Let me warn you, my brother. Your pleasure boat is far from shore, and your summer day is ending roughly, for the winds and the waves are loud-voiced, and the overcoming clouds are all awrithe and agleam with terror. You are past the narrows and almost outside the hook, and if the Atlantic take thee, frail mortal, thou shalt never get to shore again. Put back, row swiftly, swifter, swifter. Jesus from the shore casteth a rope. Clasp it quickly, now or never. Oh, are there not some of you who are freighting all your loves and joys and hopes upon a vessel which shall never reach the port of heaven? Thou nearest the breakers, one heave upon the rock. 01-1, what an awful crash was that! Another lunge may crush thee beneath the spars or grind thy bones to powder amid the torn timbers. Overboard for your life, overboard. Trust not that loose plank nor attempt the move, but quickly clasp the feet of Jesus walking on the wart-one-wide pavement, shouting until he hear thee, Lord, save me, or I perish. Sin beautiful at the start, oh, how sad, how distressful at the last. The ground over which it leads you is hollow. The fillet it offers to your taste is poison. The promise it makes toil is a lie. Over that ungodly banquet the keen sword of God's judgment hangs, and there are ominous handwritings on the wall. Hideous attractiveness. Observe also in this subject how repelling sin is when appended to great attractiveness. Since Eve's death there has been no such perfection of womanhood. You could not suggest an attractiveness to the body or suggest any refinement to the manner. You could add no gracefulness to the gait, no lustre to the eye, no sweetness to the voice. A perfect God made her a perfect woman to be the companion of a perfect man in a perfect home, and her entire nature vibrated in accord with the beauty and song of paradise. But she rebelled against God's government, and with the same hand with which she plucked the fillet she launched upon the world the crimes, the wars, the tumults, that have set the universe a-wailing, a terrible offset to all her attractiveness. We are not surprised when we find men and women naturally vulgar going into transgression. We expect that people who live in the ditch shall have the manners of the ditch, but how shocking when we find sin appended to superior education and to the refinements of social life. The accomplishments of Mary Queen of Scots make her patronage of Darnley, the profligate, the more appalling. The genius of Catherine II. Of Russia, only sets forth in more powerful contrast her unappeasable ambition. The translations from the Greek and the Latin by Elizabeth, and her wonderful qualifications for a queen, made the more disgusting her capriciousness of affection and her hotness of temper. The greatness of Burton's mind made the more alarming Byron's sensuality. Let no one who hears me this day think that refinement of manner or exquisiteness of taste or superiority of education can in any wise apologize for ill temper, for an oppressive spirit, for unkindness, for any kind of sin. Disobedience Godward and transgression manward can give no excuse. Accomplishment heaven high is no apology for vice hell deep. My subject also impresses me with the regal influence of woman. When I see Eve with this powerful influence over Adam and over the generations that have followed, it suggests to me the great power all women have for good or for evil. I have no sympathy, nor have you, with the hollow flatteries showered upon women from the platform and the stage. They mean nothing, they are accepted as nothing. Woman's nobility consists in the exercise of a Christian influence, and when I see this powerful influence of Eve upon her husband and upon the whole human race, I make up my mind that the frail arm of woman can strike a blow which will resound through all eternity down among the dungeons, or up among the thrones. Of course, I am not speaking of representative women, of Eve, who lined the race by one fillet picking, of Jael, who drove a spike through the head of Sisera the warrior, of Esther, who overcame royalty, of Abigail, who stopped a host by her own beautiful prowess, of Mary, who nursed the world's Saviour, of Grandmother Lois, immortalized in her grandson Timothy, of Charlotte Corday, who drove the dagger through the heart of the assassin of her lover, or of Marie Antoinette, who by one look from the balcony of her castle quieted a mob, her own scaffold the throne of forgiveness and womanly courage. I speak not of these extraordinary persons, but of those who, unambitious for political power, as wives and mothers, and sisters and daughters, attend to the thousand sweet offices of home. When at last we come to calculate the forces that decided the destiny of nations, it will be found that the mightiest and grandest influence came from home, where the wife cheered up despondency and fatigue and soito by her own sympathy, and the mother trained her child for heaven, staffing the little feet on the path to the celestial city, and the sisters by their gentleness refined the manners of the brother, and the daughters were diligent in their kindness to the aged, throwing wreaths of blessing on the road that leads father and mother down the steep of years. Need I go into history to find you illustrations? Ah no, in your own memoir there was at least one such. When I come to speak of womanly influence, my mind always wanders off to one model, the aged one who, 20 years ago, we put away for the resurrection. About 80 years ago, and just before their marriage day, my father and mother stood up in the old meeting house at Somerville, New Jersey, and took upon them the vows of the Christian. Through a long life of vicissitude she lived harmlessly and usefully, and came to her end in peace. No child of want ever came to her door and was turned empty away. No one in sorrow came to her but was comforted. No one asked her the way to be saved but she pointed him to the cross. When the angel of life came to a neighbor's dwelling she was there to rejoice at the incarnation. When the angel of death came to a neighbor's dwelling she was there to robe the depane for the burial. We had often heard her, when leading family prayers in the absence of my father, say, O Lord, I ask not for my children wealth or honor, but I do ask that they all may be the subjects of thy comforting grace. Her 11 children brought into the kingdom of God, she had but one more wish, and that was that she might see her long-absent missionary son, and when the ship from China anchored in New York harbor, and the long-absent one passed over the threshold of his paternal home, she said, Now, Lord, lettest thou thy servant depart in peace, for mine eyes have seen thy salvation. The prayer was soon answered. It was an autumnal day very much like this when we gathered from afar and found only the house from which the soul had fled forever. She looked very natural, the hands very much as when they were employed in kindness for her children. Whatever else we forget, we never forget the look of mother's hands. As we stood there by the casket, we could not help but say, Don't she look beautiful? It was a cloudless day when, with heavy hands, we carried her out to the last resting place. The withered leaves crumbled under hoof and wheel as we passed, and the sun shone on the Raritan River until it looked like fire, but more calm and beautiful and radiant was the setting sun of that aged pilgrim's life. No more toil, no more tears, no more sickness, no more death. Dear mother! Beautiful mother! Sweet is the slumber beneath the sod, while the pure spirit rests with God. I need not go back and show you Zenobia or Semiramis or Isabella as wonders of womanly excellence or greatness, when I in this moment point to your own picture gallery of memory, and show you the one face that you remember so well, and arouse all your holy reminiscences, and start you in new consecration to God by the pronunciation of that tender, beautiful, glorious word, Mother. Mother. Sisterly influence. And his sister stood afar off, to wit what would be done to him. Exodus 2:4. Princess Thammutis, daughter of Pharaoh, looking out through the lattice of her bathing house, on the banks of the Nile, saw a curious boat on the river. It had neither oar nor helm, and they would have been useless anyhow. There was only one passenger, and that a baby boy. But the Mayflower that brought the Pilgrim Fathers to America carried not so precious a load. The boat was made of the broad leaves of papyrus tightened together by bitumen. Boats were sometimes made of that material, as we learn from Pliny, and Herodotus, and Theophrastus. Miriam's vigil. Kill every Hebrew boy when he is born had been Pharaoh's order. To save her son, Joshua, the mother of little Moses, had put him in that queer boat and launched him. His sister Miriam stood on the bank watching that craft with its precious burden. She was far enough off not to draw attention to the boat, but near enough to offer protection. There she stands on the bank, Miriam the poetess, Miriam the quick-witted, Miriam the faithful, though very human, for in after time she became so mad with that very brother for marrying a woman she did not like, that she made a great family row, and was STNLCK with leprosy. Miriam was a splendid sister, but had her faults like all the rest of us. How carefully she watched the boat containing her brother. A strong wind might upset it. The buffaloes often found their might in a sudden plunge of thirst sink it. Some ravenous waterfowl might swoop, and pick his eyes out with iron beak. Some crocodile or hippopotamus crawling through the rushes might craunch the babe. Miriam watched and watched until Princess Thammutis, a maiden on each side of her, holding palm leaves over her head to shelter her from the sun, came down and entered her bathing house. When from the lattice she saw that boat she ordered it brought, and when the leaves were pulled back from the face of the child and the boy looked up he cried aloud, for he was hungry and frightened, and would not even let the princess take him. The infant would rather stay hungry than acknowledge any one of the court as mother. An adroit maiden. Now Miriam, the sister, incognito, no one suspecting her relation to the child, leaps from the bank and rushes down and offers to get a nurse to pacify the child. Consent is given, she brings Joshua, the baby's mother, incognito, not sure of the court knowing that she was the mother, and when Joshua arrived the child stopped crying, for its fright was calmed and its hunger appeased. You may admire Joshua, the mother, and all the ages may admire Moses, but I clap my hands in applause at the behavior of Miriam, the faithful, brilliant, and strategic sister. Go home, someone might have said to Miriam. Why risk yourself out there alone on the banks of the Nile, breathing the miasma and in danger of being attacked of wild beast orphan? Go home. No, Miriam, the sister most lovingly watched and bravely defended Moses, the brother. Is he worthy her care and courage? Oh, yes, the 60 centuries of the world's history have never had so much involved in the arrival of any ship at any port as in the landing of that papyrus boat corked with bitumen. Its one passenger was to be a nonsuch in history. Lawyer, statesman, politician, legislator, organizer, conqueror, deliverer. Hebrew legends. He had such remarkable beauty in childhood that Josephus says, when he was carried along the road, people stopped to gaze at him, and workmen would leave their work to admire him. When the king playfully put his crown upon this boy, he threw it off indignantly, and put his foot on it. The king, fearing that this might be a sign that the child might yet take down his crown, applied another test. According to the Jewish legend, the king ordered 2 bowls to be put before the child, one containing rubies, and the other burning coals. And if he took the coals he was to live, and if he took the rubies he was to die. For some reason the child took one of the coals, and put it in his mouth, so that his life was spared, although it bummed the tongue till he was indistinct of utterance ever after. Having come to manhood, he spread open the palms of his hands in prayer and the Red Sea parted to let 2,500,000 people escape. And he put the palms of his hands together in prayer and the Red Sea closed on a strangulated host. Unique burial. His life was unutterably grand, his burial must be on the same scale. God would let neither man nor saint nor archangel have anything to do with weaving for him a shroud or digging for him a grave. The omnipotent God left his throne in heaven one day, and if the question was asked, "Whither is the King of the universe going?" the answer was, "I am going down to bury Moses." And the Lord took this mightiest of men to the top of a hill, and the day was clear, and Moses ran his eye over the magnificent range of country. Here, the valley of Isdraelon, where the final battle of all nations is to be fought, and yonder, the mountains Hermon, and Lebanon, and Gerizim, and hills of Judah, and the village of Bethlehem there, and the city of Jericho yonder, and the vast stretch of landscape that almost took the old lawgiver's breath away as he looked at it. And then, without a pang, as I lean from the statement that the eye of Moses was undimmed, and his natural force unabated, God touched the great lawgiver's eyes and they closed, and his lungs, and they ceased, and his heart, and it stopped, and commanded, saying, "Eat, O the skies, thou immortal spirit." And then one divine hand was put against the back of Moses, and the other hand against the pulseless breast, and God laid him softly down on Mount Nebo, and then the lawgiver lifted in the Almighty's arms, was carried to the opening of a cave and placed in crypt, and one stroke of the divine hand smoothed the features into an everlasting calm, and a rock was rolled to the door, and the only obsequies at which God did all the offices of priest, and undertaker, and grave digger, and mourner were ended. The world indebted. Oh, was not Miriam, the sister of Moses, doing a good thing, an important thing, a glorious thing when she watched the boat woven of river plants and made watertight with asphaltum, carrying its one passenger? Did she not put all the ages of time and of a coming eternity under obligation, when she defended her helpless brother from the perils aquatic, reptilian, and ravenous? She it was that brought that wonderful babe and his mother together so that he was reared to be the deliverer of his nation, when otherwise, if saved at all from the rushes of the Nile, he would have been only one more of the God-deferring pharaohs, for Princess Thammutis, of the bathing house, would have inherited the crown of Egypt, and as she had no child of her own, this adopted child would have come to coronation. Had there been no Miriam, there would have been no Moses. What a garland for faithful sisterhood! For how many a lawgiver, and how many a hero, and how many a deliverer, and how many a saint are the world and the church indebted to a watchful, loving, faithful, godly sister. Come up out of the farmhouses, come up out of the inconspicuous homes. Come up from the banks of the Hudson, and the Penobscot, and the Savannah, and the Mobile, and the Mississippi, and all the other Niles of America, and let us see you, though Miriams who watched and protected the leaders in law and medicine and merchandise and art and agriculture and mechanics and religion. If I should ask all these physicians, and atomays, and merchants, and ministers of religion and successful men of all professions and trades who are indebted to an elder sister for good influences, and perhaps for an education or a prosperous start, to rise, they would rise by the hundreds. God knows how many of our Greek lexicons and how much of our schooling was paid for by money that would otherwise have gone for the replenishing of a sister's wardrobe. While the brother sailed off for a resounding sphere, the sister watched him from the banks of self-denial. The elder sister's power. Miriam was the oldest of the family, Moses and Aaron, her brothers, are younger. Oh, the power of the elder sister to help decide the brother's character for usefulness and for heaven. She can keep off from her brother more evils than Miriam could have driven back waterfowl or crocodile from the ark of bulrushes. The older sister decides the direction in which the cradle boat shall sail. By gentleness, by good sense, by Christian principle she can turn it toward the palace, not of a wicked Pharaoh, but of a holy God, and a brighter princess than Thammutis shall lift him out of peril, even religion, whose ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. Her toilsome life. The older sister, how much the world owes her. Born while yet the family was in limited circumstances, she had to hold and take care of her younger brothers. And if there is anything that excites my sympathy, it is a little girl lugging round a great fat child, and getting her ears boxed because she cannot keep him quiet. By the time she gets to young womanhood she is pale and worn out, and her attractiveness has been sacrificed on the altar of sisterly fidelity, and she is consigned to celibacy, and society calls her by an ungallant name, but in heaven they call her Miriam. In most families the two most undesirable places in the record of births are the first and the last, the first because she is worn out with the cares of a home that cannot afford to hire help, and the last because she is spoiled as a pet. Among the grandest equipages that sweep through the streets of heaven will be those occupied by sisters who sacrificed themselves for brothers. They will have the finest of the apocalyptic white horses, and many who on earth looked down upon them will have to turn out to let them pass. Help to make men. Let sisters not begrudge the time and care bestowed on a brother. It is hard to believe that any boy that you know so well as your brother can ever turn out anything very useful. Well, he may not be a Moses. There is only one of that kind needed for 6,000 years. But I tell you what your brother will be, either a blessing or a curse to society, and a candidate for happiness or wretchedness. He will, like Moses, have the choice between lilies and living coals, and your influence will have much to do with his decision. He may not, like Moses, be the deliverer of a nation, but he may, after your father and mother are gone, be the deliverer of a household. What thousands of homes today are piloted by brothers? There are properties now well invested and yielding income for the support of sisters and younger brothers, because the older brother rose to the leadership from the day the father laid down to die. Whatever you do for your brother will come back to you again. If you set him an ill-natured, censorious, unaccommodating example, it will recoil upon you from his own irritated and despoiled nature. If you, by patience with all his infirmities and by nobility of character, dwell with him in the few years of your companionship, you will have your counsels reflected back upon you some day by his splendor of behavior in some crisis where he would have failed but for you. Teasing a family curse. Don't snub him. Don't depreciate his ability. Don't talk discouragingly about his future. Don't let Miriam get down off the bank of the Nile, and wade out and upset the ark of bulrushes. Don't tease him. Brothers and sisters do not consider it any harm to tease. That spirit abroad in the family is one of the meanest and most devilish. There is a teasing that is pleasurable, and is only another form of innocent raillery, but that which provokes, and irritates, and makes the eye flash with anger is to be reprehended. It would be less blameworthy to take a bunch of thorns and draw them across your sister's cheek, or to take a knife and draw its sham edge across your brother's hand till the blood spurts, for that would damage only the body, but teasing is the thorn and the knife, scratching and lacerating the disposition and the soul. It is the curse of innumerable households that the brothers tease the sisters, and the sisters the brothers. Sometimes it is the color of the hair, or the shape of the features, or an affair of the heart. Sometimes it is by revealing a secret, or by a suggestive look, or a guffaw, or an ahem. Tease. 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 For God's sake quit it. Christ says, "He that hateth his brother is a murderer." Now, when you, by teasing, make your brother or sister hate you, you turn him or her into a murderer or murderess. Beware of jealousy. Don't let jealousy ever touch a sister's soul, as it so often does, because her brother gets more honor or more means. Even Miriam, the heroine of the text, was struck by that evil passion of jealousy. She had possessed unlimited influence over Moses, and now he marries, and not only so but maltries a black woman from Ethiopia, and Miriam is so disgusted and outraged at Moses, first because he had married at all, and next, because he had practiced miscegenation, that she is drawn into a frenzy, and then begins to turn white, and gets white as a corpse, and then whiter than a corpse. Her complexion is like chalk. The fact is, she has the Egyptian leprosy. And now the brother whom she had defended on the Nile comes to her rescue in a prayer that brings her restoration. Let there be no room in all your house for jealousy, either to sit or stand. It is a leprous abomination. Your brother's success, O sisters, is your success. His victories will be your victories, for, while Moses the brother led the vocal music after the crossing of the Red Sea, Miriam, the sister, with 2 glittering sheets of brass uplifted and glittering in the sun, led the instrumental music, clapping the cymbals till the last frightened neigh of pursuing cavalry horse was smothered in the wave, and the last Egyptian helmet went under. Family quarrels. How strong it makes a family when all the sisters and brothers stand together, and what an awful wreck when they disintegrate, quarrelling about a father's will and making the surrogate's office nibble with their wrangle. Better when you were little children in the nursery that with your playhouse mallets you had accidentally killed each other fighting across your cradle, than that, having come to the age of maturity, and having in your veins and arteries the blood of the same father and mother, you fight each other across the parental grave in the cemetery. The Rothschilds. If you only knew it, your interests are identical. Of all the families of the earth that ever stood together, perhaps the most conspicuous is the family of the Rothschilds. As Meyer Anselm Rothschild was about to die in 1812, he gathered his children about him, Anselm, Solomon, Nathan, Charles and James, and made them promise that they would always be united on change. Obeying that injunction, they have been the mightiest commercial power on earth, and at the raising or lowering of their scepter, nations have risen or fallen. That illustrates how much on a large scale, and for selfish purposes, a united family may achieve. But suppose that, instead of a magnitude of dollars as the object, it be doing good and making salutary impression and raising this sunken world, how much more ennobling. Sister, you do your part, and brother will do his part. If Miriam will lovingly watch the boat on the Nile, Moses will help her when leprous disasters strike. The family bond. When father and mother are gone, and they soon will be, if they have not already made exit, the sisterly and fraternal bond will be the only ligament that will hold the family together. How many reasons for your deep and unfaltering affection for each other! Rocked in the same cradle, bent over by the same motherly tenderness, toiled for by the same father's weary arm and aching brow, with common inheritance of all the family secrets, and with names given you by parents who stand you with the highest hopes for your happiness and prosperity, I charge you, be loving and kind and forgiving. If the sister see that the brother never wants a sympathizer, the brother will see that the sister never wants an escon. Oh, if the sisters of a household knew through what terrific and damning temptations their brother goes in this city life, they would hardly sleep nights in the anxiety for his salvation. And if you would make a holy conspiracy of kind words and gentle attentions and earnest prayers, that would save his soul from death and hide a multitude of sins. But let the sister dash off in one direction in discipleship of the world, and the brother flee off in another direction in dissipation, and it will not be long before they will meet again at the iron gate of despair, their blistered feet in the hot ashes of a consumed lifetime. Alas, that brothers and sisters, though living together for years, very often do not know each other, and that they see only the imperfections and none of the virtues. A Russian banquet. General Bauer, of the Russian cavalry, had in early life wandered off in the army, and the family supposed he was dead. After he gained a forenoon he encamped one day in Husum, his native place, and made a banquet, and among the great military men who were to dine, he invited a plain miller and his wife, who lived nearby, and who, affrighted, came, fearing some harm would be done them. The miller and his wife were placed one on each side of the general at the table. The general asked the miller all about his family, and the miller said that he had 2 brothers and a sister. No other brothers. My younger brother went off with the army many years ago, and no doubt was long ago killed. Then the general said, Soldiers, I am this man's younger brother whom he thought was dead. And how loud was the cheer, and how warm was the embrace! Brother and sister, you need as much of an introduction to each other as they did. You do not know each other. You think your brother is grouty and cross and queer, and he thinks you are selfish and proud and unlovely. Both wrong. That brother will be a prince in some woman's eyes, and that sister a queen in the estimation of some man. That brother is a magnificent fellow, and that sister is a morning in June. Come, let me introduce you, Moses, this is Miriam. Miriam, this is Moses. Add 75% to your present appreciation of each other, and when you kiss good morning, do not stick up your cold cheek, wet from the recent washing, as though you hated to touch each other's lips in affectionate caress. Let it have all the fondness and cordiality of a loving sister's kiss. Be agreeable. Make yourselves as agreeable and helpful to each other as possible, remembering that soon you pan. The few years of boyhood and girlhood will soon slip by, and you will go out to homes of your own, and into the battle with the world and amid ever-changing vicissitudes, and on paths crossed with graves, and up steps hard to climb, and through shadowy ravines. But oh, my God and Saviour, may the terminus of the journey be the same as the stand, namely, at father's and mother's knee, if they have inherited the kingdom. Then, as in boyhood and girlhood days, we nlshed in after the day's absence with much to tell of exciting adventure, and father and mother enjoyed the recital as much as we who made it, so we shall on the hillside of heaven rehearse to them all the scenes of our earthly expedition, and they shall welcome us home, as we say, Father and Mother, we have come, and brought our children with us. The old revival hymn described it with glorious repetition. Brothers and sisters there will meet, brothers and sisters there will meet, brothers and sisters there will meet to part no more. I read of a child in the country who was detained at a neighbour's house on a stormy night by some fascinating stories that were being told him, and then looked out and saw it was so dark he did not dare go home. The incident impressed me the more because in my childhood I had much the same experience. The boy asked his comrades to go with him, but they dared not. It got later and later, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. He said, "Wish I were home." As he opened the door the last time a blinding flash of the storm and a deafening roar overcame him. But after a while he saw in the distance a lantern, and 10. His brother was coming to fetch him home, and the lad stepped out and with swift feet hastened on to his brother who took him home, where they were so glad to greet him, and for a long time supper had been waiting. So may it be when the night of death comes and our earthly friends cannot go with us, and we dare not go alone, may our brother, our elder brother, our friend closer than a brother, come out to meet us with the light of the promises, which shall be a lantern to our feet, and then we will go in to join our loved ones waiting for us, supper all ready, the marriage supper of the Lamb. Trials of housekeeping. Lord, dost thou not care that my sister hath left me to serve alone? Bid her therefore that she help 10:40. Yonder is a beautiful village homestead. The man of the house is dead and his widow is taking charge of the premises. This is the widow Martha of Bethany. Yes, I will show you also the pet of the household. This is Mary, the youngest sister, with a book under her and her face having no appearance of anxiety or perturbation. Company has come. Christ stands outside the door and, of course, there is a good deal of excitement inside the door. The disarraying fumiture is hastily put aside, and the hair is brushed back, and the dresses are adjusted as well as, in so short a time, Mary and Manna can attend to these matters. The welcome to Christ. They did not keep Christ standing at the door until they were newly apparelled, or until they had elaborately arranged their tresses, then coming out with their affected summaries as though they had not heard the 2 or 3 previous knockings, saying, "Why, is that you?" No. They were ladies, and were always presentable, although they may not have always had on their best, for none of us always have on our best, if we did our best would not be worth having on. They throw open the door and greet Christ. They say, "Good morning, Master, come in and be seated." Christ did not come alone, he had a group of friends with him, and such an influx of city visitors would throw any country home into perturbation. I suppose also the walk from the city had been a good appetizer. The kitchen department that day was a very imponent department, and I suppose that Manna had no sooner greeted the guests than she fled to that room. Mary had no anxiety about household affairs. She had full confidence that Martha could get up the best dinner in Bethany. She seems to say, "Now, let us have a division of labor. Martha, you cook and I'll sit down and be good." Difference in sisters. So you have often seen a great difference between two sisters. There is Martha, hard-working, painstaking, a good manager, ever inventive of some new pasta, or discovering something in the art of cooking and housekeeping. There is Mary, also, fond of conversation, literary, so engaged in deep questions of ethics she has no time to attend to the questions of household welfare. It is noon. Mary is in the parlor with Christ. Martha is in the kitchen. It would have been better if they had divided the work, and then they could have divided the opportunity of listening to Jesus, but Mary monopolizes Christ, while Martha swelters at the fire. Trouble in the kitchen. It was a very important thing that they should have a good dinner that day. Christ was hungry, and he did not often have a luxurious entertainment. Alas, me! If the duty had devolved upon Mary, what a repast that would have been! But something went wrong in the kitchen. Perhaps the fire would not bum, or the bread would not bake, or Martha scalded her hand, or something was burned black that ought only to have been made brown, and Martha lost her patience, and forgetting the proprieties of the occasion, with besweated brow, and perhaps with pitcher in one hand and tongs in the other, she rushes out of the kitchen into the presence of Christ, saying, "Lord, dost thou not care that my sister hath left me to serve alone?" Christ scolded not a word. If it was scolding, I should rather have his scolding than anybody else's blessing. There was nothing acerb. He knew Martha had almost worked herself to death to get him something to eat, and so he throws a world of tenderness into his intonation as he seems to say, "My dear woman, do not worry, let the dinner go, sit down on this ottoman beside Mary, your younger sister. Manna, Martha, thou art careful and troubled about many things, but one thing is needful." As Martha throws open that kitchen door, I look in and see a great many household perplexities and anxieties. Non-appreciation. First, there is the trial of non-appreciation. That is what made Martha so mad with Mary. The younger sister had no estimate of her older sister's fatigues. As now, men bothered with the anxieties of the store, and office, and shop, or coming from the stock exchange, they say when they get home, "Oh, you ought to be in our factory a little while, you ought to have to manage 8, or 10, or 20 subordinates, and then you would know what trouble and anxiety are." Oh, sir, the wife and the mother has to conduct at the same time a university, a clothing establishment, a restaurant, a laundry, a library, while she is health officer, police and president of her realm. She must do 1,000 things, and do them well, in order to keep things going smoothly, and so her brain and her nerves are taxed to the utmost. I know there are housekeepers who are so fortunate that they can sit in an armchair in the library, or lie on the belated pillow, and throw off all the care upon subordinates who, having large wages and great experience, can attend to all of the affairs of the household. Those are the exception. I am speaking this morning of the great mass of housekeepers, the women to whom life is a struggle, and who, at 30 years of age, look as though they were 40, and at 40 look as though they were 50, and at 50 look as though they were 60. The fallen at Chalons, and Austerlitz, and Gettysburg, and Waterloo are a small number compared with the slain in the great Armageddon of the kitchen. You go out to the cemetery and you will see that the tombstones all read beautifully poetic, but if those tombstones would speak the TNLTH, thousands of them would say, "Here lies a woman killed by too much mending, and sewing, and baking, and scalding, and scouring. The weapon with which she was slain was a broom, or a sewing machine, or a ladle." A wearing life. You think, O man of the world, that you have all the cares and anxieties. If the cares and anxieties of the household should come upon you for 1 week, you would be a fit candidate for Bloomingdale, I mean insane asylum. The half-rested housekeeper arises in the morning. She must have the morning repast prepared at an irrevocable hour. What if the fire will not light? What if the marketing did not come? What if the clock has stopped? No matter, she must have the morning repast at an irrevocable hour. Then the children must be got off to school. What if their garments are torn? What if they do not know their lessons? What if they have lost a hat or sash? They must be ready. Then you have all the diet of the day, and perhaps of several days, to plan, but what if the butcher has sent meat unmasticable, or the grocer has sent articles of food adulterated, and what if some piece of silver be gone, or some favorite chalice be cracked, or the roof leak, or the plumbing fail, or any one of 1,000 things occur? You must be ready. Spring weather comes, and there must be a revolution in the family wardrobe, or autumn comes, and you must shut out the northern blast. But what if the moth has preceded you to the chest? What if, during the year, the children have outgrown the apparel of last year? What if the fashions have changed? Your house must be an apothecary's shop, it must be a dispensary, there must be medicines for all sorts of ailments, something to loosen the croup, something to cool the bum, something to poultice the inflammation, something to silence the jumping tooth, something to soothe the earache. You must be in 6 places at the same time, or you must attempt to be assured sympathy. If, under all this wear and tear of life, Martha makes an impatient n1 upon the library or drawing room, be patient, be lenient. Oh, woman, though I may fail to stir up an appreciation in the souls of others in regard to your household toils, let me assure you, from the kindliness with which Jesus Christ met Martha, that he appreciates all your work from garret to cellar, and that the God of Deborah, and Hannah, and Abigail and Grandmother Lois, and Elizabeth Fry, and Hannah More is the God of the housekeeper. Jesus was never married that he might be the especial friend and confidant of a whole world of troubled womanhood. I blunder, Christ was married. The Bible says that the church is the Lamb's wife, and that makes me know that all Christian women have a right to go to Christ and tell him of their annoyances and troubles, since by his oath of conjugal fidelity he is swum to sympathies. George Herbert, the Christian poet, wrote 2 or 3 verses on this subject. The servant by this clause makes drudgery divine, who sweeps a room, as for thy laws, makes this and the action fine. Again, there is the trial of severe economy. 999 households out of 1,000 are subjected to it, some under more and some under less stress of circumstances. Especially if a man smoke very expensive cigars, and take very costly dinners at the restaurants, he will be severe in demanding domestic economies. This is what kills tens of thousands of women, attempting to make $5 do the work of 7. How the bills come in. The woman is the banker of the household, she is the president, the cashier, the teller, the discount clerk, and there is a panic every few weeks. This 30 years' war against high prices, this perpetual study of economics, this lifelong attempt to keep the outgoes less than the income, exhausts millions of housekeepers. A preparation. Oh, my sister, this is a part of the divine discipline. If it were best for you, all you would have to do would be to open the front windows and the ravens would fly in with food, and after you had baked 50 times from the barrel in the pantry, the barrel, like the one of Zarephath, would be full, and the shoes of the children would last as long as the shoes of the Israelites in the wilderness, 40 years. Beside that, this is going to make heaven the more attractive in the contrast. They never hunger there, and consequently there will be none of the nuisances of catering for appetites. And in the land of the white robe they never have to mend anything, and the air in that hill country makes everybody well. There are no rents to pay, every man owns his own house, and a mansion at that. It will not be so great a change for you to have a chariot in heaven if you have been in the habit of riding in this world. It will not be so great a change for you to sit down on the banks of the river of life if in this world you had a country seat, but if you have walked with tired feet in this world, what a glorious change to mount celestial equipage, and if your life on earth was domestic martyrdom, oh, the joy of an eternity in which you shall have nothing to do except what you choose to do. Martha has had no drudgery for 18 centuries. I quarrel with the theologians who want to distribute all the thrones of heaven among the John Knoxes and the Hugh Latimers, and the Theban Legion. Some of the brightest thrones of heaven will be kept for Christian housekeepers. Oh, what a change from here to there, from the time when they put down the rolling pin to when they take up the scepter. If Chatsworth Park and the Vanderbilt Mansion on Fifth Avenue were to be lifted into the celestial city, they would be considered uninhabitable rookeries, and glorified Lazarus would be ashamed to be seen going in and out of either of them. The trial of sickness. There are many housekeepers who could get along with their toils if it were not for sickness and trouble. The fact is, 1/2 of the women of the land are more or less invalids. The mountain lass, who has never had an ache or pain, may consider household toil inconsiderable, and toward evening she may skip away miles to the fields and drive home the cattle, and she may until 10 o'clock at night fill the house with laughing racket. But 01-1, to do the work of life with worn-out constitution, when whooping cough has been raging for 6 weeks in the household, making the night as sleepless as the day, that is not so easy. Perhaps this comes after the nerves have been shattered by some bereavement that has left desolation in every room of the house, and set the crib in the garret, because the occupant has been hushed into a slumber which needs no mother's lullaby. Oh, she could provide for the whole group a great deal better than she can for a part of the group now the rest are gone. Though you may tell her God is taking care of those who are gone, it is mother-like to brood both flocks, and one wing she puts over the flock in the house, the other wing she puts over the flock in the grave. There is nothing but the old-fashioned religion of Jesus Christ that will take a woman through the trials of home life. At first there may be a romance or a novelty that will do for a substitute. The marriage hour has just passed, and the perplexities of the household are more than atoned by the joy of being together, and by the fact that when it is late they do not have to discuss the question as to whether it is time to go. The mishaps of the household, instead of being a matter of anxiety and apprehension, are a matter of merriment, the loaf of bread turned into a geological specimen, the slushy custards, the jaundiced or measly biscuits. It is a bright sunlight that falls on the cutlery and the mantel ornaments of a new home. The pros of matrimony. But after a while the romance is all gone, and then there is something to be prepared for the table that the book called Cookery taught in 12 lessons will not teach. The receipt for making it is not a handful of this, a cup of that, and a spoonful of something else. It is not something sweetened with ordinary condiments, or flavored with ordinary flavors, or baked in ordinary ovens. It is the loaf of domestic happiness, and all the ingredients come down from heaven, and the fenlets are plucked from the tree of life, and it is sweetened with the new wine of the kingdom, and it is baked in the oven of home trial. Solomon wrote out of his own experience. He had a wretched home. A man cannot be happy with 2 wives, much less 600, and he says, writing out of his own experience, better is a dinner of herbs where love is, than a stalled ox and hatred therewith. Glorious self-sacrifice. How great are the responsibilities of housekeepers! Sometimes an indigestible article of food, by its effect upon a commander or king, has defeated an army or overthrown an empire. Housekeepers, by the food they provide, by the couches they spread, by the books they introduce, by the influences they bring around the home, are deciding the physical, intellectual, moral, eternal destiny of the race. You say your life is one of sacrifice. I know it. But, my sisters, that is the only life worth living. That was Florence Nightingale's life, that was Paysan's life, that was Christ's life. We admire it in others, but how very hard it is for us to cultivate ourselves. When in this city young Dr. Hutchison, having spent a whole night in a diphtheritic room for the relief of a patient, became saturated with the poison and died, we all felt as if we would like to put garlands on his grave. Everybody appreciates that. When in the burning hotel at St. Louis a young man on the 5th story broke open the door of the room where his mother was sleeping, and plunged in amid smoke and fire, CRYMG, mother, where are you, and never came out, our Heans applauded that young man. But how few of us have the Christ-like spirit, a willingness to suffer for others. A barbarous pedagogue, a rough teacher in a school, called upon a poor, half-starved lad, who had offended against the laws of the school, and said, "Take off your coat directly, sir." The boy refused to take it off, whereupon the teacher said again, "Take off your coat, sir," as he swung the whip through the air. The boy refused. It was not because he was afraid of the lash, he was used to that at home, but it was from shame. He had no undergarment, and as at the third command he pulled slowly off his coat, there went a sob through the school. They saw then why he did not want to remove his coat, and they saw the shoulder blades had almost cut through the skin, and a stout, healthy boy rose up and went to the teacher of the school and said, 011, "Sir, please don't hurt this poor fellow, whip me, see, he's nothing but a poor chap, don't you hurt him, he's poor, whip me." "Well," said the teacher, "it's going to be a severe whipping, I am willing to take you as a substitute." "Well," said the boy, "6 don't care, you whip me, if you will let this poor fellow go." The stout, healthy boy took the scourging without an outcry. 4. Bravo says how many of us are willing to take the scourging, and the suffering, and the toil, and the anxiety for other people. Beautiful thing to admire, but how little we have of that spirit. God give us that self-denying spirit, so that whether we are in humble spheres or in conspicuous spheres we may perform our whole duty, for this struggle will soon be over. A Christian housekeeper. One of the most affecting reminiscences of my mother is my remembrance of her as a Christian housekeeper. She worked very hard, and when we would come in from summer play, and sit down at the table at noon, I remember how she used to come in with beads of perspiration along the line of grey hair, and how sometimes she would sit down at the table and put her head against her wrinkled hand and say, "Well, the fact is, I'm too tired to eat." Long after she might have delegated this duty to others, she would not be satisfied unless she attended to the matter herself. In fact, we all preferred to have her do so, for somehow things tasted better when she prepared them. Some time ago, in an express train, I shot past that old homestead. I looked out of the window and tried to peer through the darkness. While I was doing so, one of my old schoolmates, whom I had not seen for many years, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Whit, I see you are looking out at the scenes of your boyhood." "Oh, yes," I replied, "was looking out at the old place where my mother lived and died." That night, in the cars, the whole scene came back to me. There was the country home. There was the noonday table. There were the children on either side of the table, most of them gone never to come back. At one end of the table my father, with a smile that never left his countenance even when he lay in his coffin. It was an 86 years smile, not the smile of inanimation, but of Christian courage and of Christian hope. At the other end of the table was a beautiful, benignant, hard-working, aged Christian housekeeper, my mother. She was very tired. I am glad she has so good a place to rest in. Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord, they rest from their labours, and their works do follow them. Woman enthroned. Their 80 queens. Solomon sinew 6:8. So Solomon, by one stroke, sets forth the imperial character of a TNLE Christian woman. She is not a slave, not a hireling, not a subordinate, but a queen, and in my text Solomon sees 60 of these helping to make up the royal pageant of Jesus. Crown and courtly attendants and imperial wardrobe are not necessary to make a queen, but graces of the heart and life will give coronation to any woman. Woman's position is higher in the world than man's, and although she has often been denied the right of suffrage, she always does vote, and always will vote, by her influence, and her chief desire ought to be that she should have grace rightly to rule in the dominion which she has already won. My chief anxiety is not that women have other rights accorded her, but that she by the grace of God rise up to the appreciation of the glorious rights she already possesses. I shall enumerate some of those rights this morning. 1. In the first place, woman has the special and superlative right of blessing and comforting the sick. What land, what street, what house has not felt the smitings of disease? Tens of thousands of sick beds. What shall we do with them? Shall man, with his rough hand and heavy foot and impatient bearing, minister? No. He cannot soothe the pain. He cannot quiet the nerves. He knows not where to set the light. His hand is not steady enough to pour out the drops. He is not wakeful enough to be watcher. The Lord God, who sent mystics into the Virginia hospitals, and Florence Nightingale into the Crimea, and the Maid of Saragossa to appease the wounds of the battlefield, has equipped wife, mother, and daughter for this delicate but tremendous mission. You have known men who despised women, but the moment disease fell upon them, they did not send for their friends at the bank, or their partner in business, or their worldly associates. Their first cry was, "Take me to my wife." The dissipated young man at the college scoffs at the idea of being under home influences, but at the first blast of the typhoid fever on his cheek he says, "Where is mother?" I think one of most pathetic passages in all the Bible is the description of the lad who went out to the harvest field of Shunem and got Sntlck, throwing his hands on his temples and crying out, "Oh, my head! My head!" And they said, "Carry him to his mother." And then the record is, he sat on her knees till noon, and then died. It is an awful thing to be ill away from home in a strange hotel, once in a while men coming in to look at you, holding their hand over their mouth for fear they will catch the contagion. How roughly they turn you in the bed. How loudly they talk. How you long for the ministries of home. I knew one such who went away from one of the brightest of homes for several weeks' business absence at the West. A telegram came at midnight that he was on his deathbed, far away from home. By express train the wife and daughters went westward, but they went too late. He feared not to die, but he was in an agony to live until his family got there. He tried to bribe the doctor to make him live a little while longer. He said, "I'm willing to die, but not alone." But the pulses fluttered, the eyes closed, and the heart stopped. The express trains met in the midnight, wife and daughters going westward, lifeless remains of husband and father coming eastward. Oh, it was a sad, pitiful, overwhelming spectacle. When we are sick we want to be sick at home. When the time comes for us to die, we want to die at home. The room may be view humble, and the faces that look into ours may be very plain, but who cares for that? Loving hands to bathe the temples, loving voices to speak good cheer, loving lips to read the comforting promises of Jesus. In the war men cast the cannon, men fashioned the musketry, men cried to the hosts, "Forward, march," men hurled their battalions on the sharp edges of the enemy, crying, "Charge! Charge!" But women scraped the lint, women administered the cordials, women watched by the dying couch, women wrote the last message to the home circle, woman wept at the solitary burial, attended by herself and 4 men with a spade. We greeted the general's home with brass bands and triumphal arches and wild huzzas, but the story is too good to be written anywhere, save in the Chronicles of Heaven, of Mrs. Brady, who came down among the sick in the swamps of the Chickahominy, of Annie Ross in the Cooper Shop Hospital, of Margaret Breckinridge, who came to men who had been for weeks with their wounds undressed, some of them frozen to the ground, and when she turned them over, those who had an arm left waved it, and filled the air with their hurrah. Of Mrs. Hodge, who came from Chicago with blankets and with pillows, until the men shouted, 3 cheers for the Christian Commission. God bless the women at home. Then sitting down to take the last message, "Tell my wife not to fret about me, but to meet me in heaven, tell her to train up the boys whom we have loved so well, tell her we shall meet again in the good land, tell her to bear my loss like the Christian wife of a Christian of Mrs. Shelton, into whose face the convalescent soldier looked and said, 'Your grapes and cologne cured me.'" Men did their work with shot, and shell, and carbine, and howitzer, women did their work with socks, and slippers, and bandages, and warm drinks, and scripture texts, and gentle strokings of the hot temples, and stories of that land where they never have any pain. Men knelt down over the wounded and said, "On which side did you fight?" Women knelt down over the wounded and said, "Where are you hurt? What nice thing can I make for you to eat? What makes you cry?" Tonight, while we men are sound asleep in our beds, there will be a light in yonder loft, there will be groaning down that dark alley, there will be cries of distress in that cellar. Men will sleep, and women will watch. Again, woman has a superlative right to take care of the poor. There are hundreds and thousands of them in all our cities. There is a kind of work that men cannot do for the poor. Here comes a group of little barefoot children to the door of the Dorcas Society. They need to be clothed and provided for. Which of these directors of banks would know how many yards it would take to make that little girl a dress? Which of these masculine hands could fit a hat to that little girl's head? Which of the wise men would know how to tie on that new pair of shoes? Man sometimes gives his charity in a rough way, and it falls like the fillet of a tree in the east, which fillet comes down so heavily that it breaks the skull of the man who is trying to gather it. But woman glides so softly into the house of destitution, and finds out all the sorrows of the place, and puts so quietly the donation on the table, that all the family come out on the front steps as she departs, expecting that from under her shawl she will thrust out two wings and go right up toward heaven, from whence she seems to have come down. O Christian young woman, if you would make yourself happy and win the blessing of Christ, go out among the destitute. A loaf of bread or a bundle of socks may make a homely load to carry, but the angels of God will come out to watch, and the Lord Almighty will give his messenger hosts a charge, saying, "Look after that woman, canopy her with your wings and shelter her from all harm," and while you are seated in the house of destitution and suffering, the little ones around the room will whisper, "Who is she? Ain't she beautiful?" And if you will listen right sharply, you will hear dripping down through the leaky roof, and rolling over the rotten stairs, the angel chant that shook Bethlehem, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill to men." Can you tell me why a Christian woman, going down among the haunts of iniquity on a Christian errand, never meets with any indignity? I stood in the chapel of Helen Chalmers, the daughter of the celebrated Dr. Chalmers, in the most abandoned part of the city of Edinburgh, and I said to her, as I looked around upon the fearful surroundings of that place, "Do you come here nights to hold a service?" "Oh yes," she said, "I take my lantern and I go through all these haunts of sin, the darkest and the worst, and I ask all the men and women to come to the chapel, and then I sing for them, and I pray for them, and I talk to them." I said, "Can it be possible that you never meet with an insult while performing this Christian errand?" "Never," she said, "never." That young woman who has her father by her side walking down the street, and an armed police at each comer, is not so well defended as that Christian woman who goes forth on gospel work into the haunts of iniquity, carrying Bibles and bread. Someone said, "I'll dislike very much to see that Christian woman teaching those bad boys in the mission school. I am afraid to have her instruct them." So said another man, "I am afraid too." Said the first, "I am afraid they will use vile language before they leave the place." "Ah," said the other man, "I am not afraid of that. What I am afraid of is that if any of those boys should use a bad word in that presence, the other boys would tear him to pieces and kill him on the spot." Solicitation of charities. Backed up by barrels in which there is no flour, and by stoves in which there is no fire, and by wardrobes in which there are no clothes, a woman is irresistible. Passing on her errand, God says to her, "You go into that bank, or store, or shop, and get the money." She goes in and gets it. The man is hard-fisted, but she gets it. She could not help but get it. It is decreed from eternity she should get it. No need of your turning your back and pretending you don't hear, you do hear. There is no need of your saying you are begged to death. There is no need of your wasting your time, and you might as well submit first as last. You had better right away take down your checkbook, mark the number of the check, fill up the blank, sign your name, and hand it to her. There is no need of wasting time. Those poor children on the back street have been hungry long enough. That sick man must have some farina. That consumptive must have something to ease his cough. I meet this delegate of a relief society coming out of the store of such a hard-fisted man, and I say, "Did you get the money?" "Of course," she says, "Elle got the money, that's what I went for. The Lord told me to go in and get it, and He never sends me on a fool's errand." 2. Again I have to tell you that it is woman's specific right to comfort under the stress of dire disaster. She is called the weaker vessel, but all profane as well as sacred history attests that, when the crisis comes, she is better prepared than man to meet the emergency. How often you have seen a woman who seemed to be a disciple of frivolity and indolence, who, under one stroke of calamity, changed to a heroine? Oh, what a great mistake those businessmen make who never tell their business troubles to their wives. There comes some great loss to their store, or some of their companions in business play them a sad trick, and they carry the burden all alone. He is asked in the household, again and again, what is the matter, but he believes it a sort of Christian duty to keep all that trouble within his own soul. Oh sir, your first duty was to tell your wife all about it. She perhaps might not have disentangled your finances or extended your credit, but she would have helped you to bear misfortune. You have no right to carry on one shoulder that which is intended for two. There are businessmen here who know what I mean. There came a crisis in your affairs. You struggled bravely and long, but after a while there came a day when you said, "Here I shall have to stop," and you called in your partners, and you called in the most prominent men in your employ, and you said, "We have got to stop." You left the store suddenly. You could hardly make up your mind to pass through the street and over on the ferry boat. You felt everybody would be looking at you, and blaming you, and denouncing you. You hastened home. You told your wife all about the affair. What did she say? Did she play the butterfly? Did she talk about the silks and the ribbons and the fashions? No. She came up to the emergency. She quailed not under the stroke. She helped you begin to plan right away. She offered to go out of the comfortable house into a smaller one, and wear the old cloak another winter. She was one who understood your affairs without blaming you. You looked upon what you thought was a thin, weak woman's arm holding you up, but while you looked at that arm, there came into the feeble muscles of it the strength of the eternal God. No chiding. No fretting. No telling you about the beautiful house of her father, from which you brought her 10, 20, or 30 years ago. You said, "Vivel, this is the happiest day of my life. I am glad I have got from under my burden. My wife don't care, I don't care." At the moment you were utterly exhausted. God sent a Deborah to meet the host of the Amalekites, and scatter them like chaff over the plain. There are sometimes women who sit reading sentimental novels, and who wish that they had some grand field in which to display their Christian powers. Oh, what grand and glorious things they could do if they only had an opportunity. My sister, you need not wait for any such time. A crisis will come in your affairs. There will be a Thermopylae in your own household, where God will tell you to stand. There are scores and hundreds of households in this city today where as much bravery and courage are demanded of women as was exhibited by Grace Darling, or Marie Antoinette, or Joan of Arc. 2. Again, I remark, it is woman's right to bring to us the kingdom of heaven. It is easier for a woman to be a Christian than for a man. Why? You say she is weaker. No. Her health is more responsive to the pleadings of divine love. She is in vast majority. The fact that she can more easily become a Christian I prove by the statement that 3/4 of the members of the churches in all Christendom are women. So God appoints them to be the chief agencies for bringing this world back to God. The greatest sermons are not preached on celebrated platforms, they are preached with an audience of 2 or 3, and in private home life. A consistent, consecrated Christian service is an unanswerable demonstration of God's TNLTH. A group of rough men were assembled at a tavern one night. It came on toward morning, 1 or 2 o'clock. One man boasted that it did not make any difference what time he went home. His wife cheerfully opened the door, and provided an entertainment if he was hungry when he got home. So they laid a wager. They said, "Now, we'll go along with you. So much shall be wagered. We'll bet so much that when you go home and make such a demand she will resist it." So they went along at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and knocked at the door. The door opened, and the man said to his wife, "Get us a supper." She said, "What shall I get?" He selected the articles of food. Very cheerfully were they provided, and about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning they sat down at the table, the most cheerful one in all that presents the Christian wife, when the man, the ruffian, the villain who had demanded all this, broke into tears, and said, "Can't stand this. Oh, what a wretch I am." He disbanded that group. He knelt down with his Christian wife and asked her to pray for the salvation of his immortal soul, and before the morning dawned they were united in the faith and hope of the gospel. A patient, loving, Christian demeanor in the presence of transgression, in the presence of hardness, in the presence of obduracy and crime, is an argument from the throne of the Lord Almighty, and blessed is that woman who can wield such an argument. A sailor came slipping down the ratline one night, as though something had happened, and the sailors cried, "What's the matter?" He said, "My mother's prayers haunt me like a ghost." Home influences, consecrated Christian home influences, are the mightiest of all influences upon the soul. There are men here today who have maintained their integrity, not because they were any better naturally than some other people, but because there were home influences praying for them all the time. They got a good start. They were launched on the world with the benedictions of a Christian mother. They may track Siberian snows, they may plunge into African jungles, they may fly to the earth's end, they cannot go so far and so fast, but the prayers will keep up with them. I stand before women this morning who have the eternal salvation of their husbands in their right hand. On the marriage day you took an oath before men and angels that you would be faithful and kind until death did you part, and I believe you are going to keep that oath, but after that parting at the door of the grave, will it be an eternal separation? Is there any such thing as an immortal marriage? Making the flowers that grow on the top of the sepulchre brighter than the garlands which at the marriage banquet flooded the air with aroma? Yes, I stand here as a priest of the Most High God to proclaim the banns of an immortal union for all those who join hands in the grace of Christ. O woman, is your husband, your father, your son away from God? The Lord demands their redemption at your hands. There are prayers for you to offer, there are exhortations for you to give, there are examples for you to make, and I say now, this morning, as Paul said to the Corinthian woman, "What knowest thou, O woman, but thou canst save thy husband?" A man was dying, and he said to his wife, "Rebecca, you wouldn't let me have family prayers, and you laughed about all that, and you got me away into worldliness, and now I am going to die, and my fate is sealed, and you the cause of my ruin. O woman, what knowest thou but thou canst destroy thy husband?" Are there not some here who have kindly influences at home? Are there not some here who have wandered far away from God, who can remember the Christian influences in their early home? Do not despise those influences, my brother. If you die without Christ, what will you do with your mother's prayers, with your wife's importunities, with your sister's entreaties? What will you do with the letters they used to write to you, with the memory of those days when they attended you so kindly in times of sickness? Oh, if there be but just one strand holding you from floating off on that dark sea, I would just like, this morning, to take hold of that strand and pull you to the beach. For the sake of your wife's God, for the sake of your mother's God, for the sake of your daughter's God, for the sake of your sister's God, come this day and be saved. Lastly, I wish to say that one of the specific rights of women is, through the grace of Christ, finally to reach heaven. Oh, what a multitude of women in heaven! Mary, Christ's mother, in heaven, Elizabeth Fry in heaven, Charlotte Elizabeth in heaven, the mother of Augustine in heaven, the Countess of Huntingdon, who sold her splendid jewels to build chapels, in heaven, while a great many others, who have never been heard of on earth, or known but little, have gone into the rest and peace of heaven. What a rest! What a change it was from the small room, with no fire and one window, the glass broken out, and the aching side and worn-out eyes, to the house of many mansions. No more stitching until 12 o'clock at night, no more sting of the thumb by the employer through the work to show it was not done quite right. Plenty of bread at last. Heaven for aching heads. Heaven for broken hearts. Heaven for anguish-bitten frames. No more sitting up until midnight for the coming of staggering steps. No more rough blows across the temples. No more sharp, keen, bitter curse. Some of you will have no rest in this world. It will be toil and struggle and suffering all the way up. You will have to stand at your door fighting back the wolf with your own hand red with carnage. But God has a crown for you. I want you to realize, this morning, that He is now making it, and whenever you weep a tear He sets another gem in that crown, whenever you have a pang of body or soul He puts another gem in that crown, until, after a while, in all the tiara there will be no room for another splendor, and God will say to His angel, "The crown is done, let her up that she may wear it." And as the Lord of righteousness puts the crown upon your brow, angel will cry to angel, "Who is she?" And Christ will say, "El will tell you who she's. She is the one that came up out of great tribulation, and had her robe washed and made white in the blood of Lamb a banquet." And then God will spread a banquet, and He will invite all the principalities of heaven to sit at the feast, and the tables will blush with the best clusters from the vineyards of God, and crimson with the 12 manner of fruits from the tree of life, and water from the fountains of the rock will flash from the golden tankards, and the old harpers of heaven will sit there making music with their harps, and Christ will point you out amid the celebrities of heaven, saying, "She suffered with me on earth, now we are going to be glorified together." And the banqueters, no longer able to hold their peace, will break forth with congratulation, "Hail! Hail!" And there will be handwritings on the wall, not such as Stnlck the Persian nobleman with horror, but fire-tipped fingers writing in blazing capitals of light and love and victory, "God hath wiped away all tears from all faces." The old folks visit. Will go and see him before 45 hours 28 minutes. Jacob had long since passed the 100-year milestone. In those times people were distinguished for longevity. In the centuries after persons lived to great age. Galen, the most celebrated physician of his time, took so little of his own medicine, that he lived to 140 years. A man of undoubted veracity on the witness stand in England swore that he remembered an event 150 years before. Lord Bacon speaks of a countess who had cut 3 sets of teeth, and died at 140 years. Joseph Krill, of Pennsylvania, lived 140 years. In 1857, a book was printed containing the names of 37 persons who lived 140 years, and the names of 11 persons who lived 150 years. Among the grand old people of whom we have record was Jacob, the shepherd of the text. But he had a bad lot of boys. They were jealous and ambitious and every way unprincipled. Joseph, however, seemed to be an exception, but he had been gone many years, and the probability was that he was dead. As sometimes now in a house you will find kept at the table a vacant chair, a plate, a knife, a fork, for some deceased member of the family, so Jacob kept in his heart a place for his beloved Joseph. There sits the old man, the flock of 101 years in their flight having alighted long enough to leave the marks of their claw on forehead and cheek and temple. His long beard snows down over his chest. His eyes are somewhat dim, and he can see funner when they are closed than when they are open, for he can see clear back into the time when beautiful Rachel, his wife, was living, and his children shook the oriental abode with their merriment. The centenarian is sitting dreaming over the past when he hears a wagon rumbling to the front door. He gets up and goes to the door to see who has arrived, and his long-absent sons from Egypt come in and announce to him that Joseph, instead of being dead, is living in an Egyptian palace, with all the investiture of prime minister, next to the king in the mightiest empire of all the world. The news was too sudden and too glad for the old man, and his cheeks whiten, and he has a dazed look, and his staff falls out of his hand, and he would have dropped had not the sons caught him and led him to a lounge and put cold water on his face, and fanned him a little. In that half-delirium the old man mumbles something about his son Joseph. He says, "You do not mean Joseph, do you? My dear son who has been dead so long. You don't mean Joseph, do you?" But after they had fully resuscitated him, and the news was confirmed, the tears begin the winding way down the crossroads of the wrinkles, and the sunken lips of the old man quiver, and he brings his bent fingers together as he says, "Joseph is yet alive. I will go and see him before I die." It did not take the old man a great while to get ready, I warrant you. He put on the best clothes that the shepherd's wardrobe could afford. He got into the wagon, and though the aged are cautious and like to ride slow, the wagon did not get along fast enough for this old man, and when the wagon with the old man met Joseph's chariot coming down to meet him, and Joseph got out of the chariot and got into the wagon and threw his arms around his father's neck, it was an antithesis of royalty and rusticity, of simplicity and pomp, of filial affection and paternal love, which leaves us so much in doubt about whether we had better laugh or cd, that we do both. So Jacob kept the resolution of the text, "El will go and see him before I die." And if our friends the reporters would like to have an appropriate title for this sermon, they might call it The Old Folks' Visit. What a strong and unfailing thing is parental attachment! Was it not almost time for Jacob to forget Joseph? The hot suns of many summers had blazed on the heath, the river Nile had overflowed and receded again and again, the seed had been sown and the harvests reaped, stars rose and set, years of plenty and years of famine had passed on, but the love of Jacob for Joseph in my text is overwhelmingly dramatic. Oh, that is a cord that is not snapped, though pulled on by many decades. Though when the little child expired the parents may not have been more than 25 years of age, and now they are 75, yet the vision of the cradle, and the childish face, and the first utterances of the infantile lips are fresh today, in spite of the passage of a half-century. Joseph was as fresh in Jacob's memory as ever, though at 17 years of age the boy had disappeared from the old homestead. I found in our family record the ST01Y of an infant that had died 50 years before, and I said to my parents, "What is this record, and what does it mean?" Their chief answer was a long deep sigh. It was yet to them a very tender sorrow. What does that all mean? Why, it means our children departed are ours yet, and that cord of attachment reaching across the years will hold us until it brings us together in the palace, as Jacob and Joseph were brought together. That is one thing that makes old people die happy. They realize it is reunion with those from whom they have long been separated. I am often asked as pastor, and every pastor is asked the question, will my children be children in heaven, and forever children? Well, there was no doubt a great change in Joseph from the time Jacob lost him, and the time when Jacob found him. Between the boy 17 years of age and the man in midlife, his forehead developed with a great business estate, but Jacob was glad to get back Joseph anyhow, and it did not make much difference to the old man whether the boy looked older, or looked younger. And it will be enough joy for that parent if he can get back that son, that daughter, at the gate of heaven, whether the departed loved one shall come a cherub or in full-grown angelhood. There must be a change wrought by that celestial climate and by those supernal years, but it will only be from loveliness to more loveliness, and from health to more radiant health. O parent, as you think of the darling panting and white in membranous croup, I want you to know it will be gloriously bettered in that land where there has never been a death and where all the inhabitants will live on in the great future as long as God. Joseph was Joseph notwithstanding the palace, and your child will be your child notwithstanding all the reigning splendors of everlasting noon. What a thrilling visit was that of the old shepherd to the Prime Minister Joseph. I see the old countryman seated in the palace looking around at the mirrors and the fountains and the carved pillars, and oh, how he wishes that Rachel, his wife, was alive and she could have come there with him to see their son in his great house. Oh, says the old man within himself, I do wish Rachel could be here to see all this. I visited at the farmhouse of the father of Millard Fillmore when the son was President of the United States, and the octogenarian farmer entertained me until 11 o'clock at night telling me what great things he saw in his son's house at Washington, and what Daniel Webster said to him, and how grandly Millard treated his father in the White House. The old man's face was illumined with the story until almost the midnight. He had just been visiting his son at the Capitol. And I suppose it was something of the same joy that thrilled the heart of the old shepherd as he stood in the palace of the Prime Minister. It is a great day with you. When your old parents came to visit you, your little children stand around with great wide open eyes, wondering how anybody could be so old. The parents cannot stay many days, for they are a little restless, and especially at nightfall, because they sleep better in their own bed, but while they tarry you somehow feel there is a benediction in every room in the house. They are a little feeble, and you make it as easy as you can for them, and you realize they will probably not visit you very often, perhaps never again. You go to their room after they have retired at night to see if the lights are properly put out, for the old people understand candle and lamp better than the modem apparatus for illumination. In the morning, with real interest in their health, you ask them how they rested last night. Joseph in the historical scene of the text did not think any more of his father than you do of your parents. The probability is, before they leave your house they half spoil your children with kindnesses. Grandfather and grandmother are more lenient and indulgent to your children than they ever were with you. And what wonders of revelation in the bombazine pocket of the one and the sleeve of the other. Blessed is that home where Christian parents come to visit. Whatever may have been the style of the architecture when they come, it is a palace before they leave. If they visit you 50 times, the two most memorable visits will be the first and the last. Those two pictures will hang in the hall of your memory while memory lasts, and you will remember just how they looked, and where they sat, and what they said, and at what figure of the carpet, and at what door-sill they parted with you, giving you the final goodbye. Do not be embarrassed if your father come to town and he have the manners of the shepherd, and if your mother come to town and there be in her hat no sign of costly millinery. The wife of Emperor Theodosius said a wise thing when she said, "Husband, remember what you lately were, and remember what you are, and be thankful." By this time you all notice what kindly provision Joseph made for his father Jacob. Joseph did not say, "El can't have the old man around this place. How clumsy he would look climbing up these marble stairs, and walking over these mosaics. Then, he would be putting his hands upon some of these frescoes. People would wonder where that old greenhorn came from. He would shock all the Egyptian court with his manners at table. Besides that, he might get sick on my hands, and he might be querulous, and he might talk to me as though I were only a boy, when I am the second man in all the realm. Of course, he must not suffer, and if there is famine in his country, and I hear there is, I will send him some provisions, but I can't take a man from Padan Aram and introduce him into this polite Egyptian court. What a nuisance it is to have poor relations." Joseph did not say that, but he lushed out to meet his father with perfect abandon of affection, and brought him up to the palace, and introduced him to the emperor, and provided for all the rest of the father's days, and nothing was too good for the old man while living, and when he was dead Joseph, with military escort, took his father's remains to the family cemetery at Machpelah and put them down beside Rachel, Joseph's mother. Would God all children were as kind to their parents. If the father have large property, and he be wise enough to keep it in his own name, he will be respected by the heirs, but how often it is when the son finds the father in famine, as Joseph found Jacob in famine, the young people make it very hard for the old man. They are so surprised he eats with a knife instead of a fork. They are chagrined at his antediluvian habits. They are provoked because he cannot hear as well as he used to, and when he asks it over again, and the son has to repeat it, he bawls in the old man's ear, "I hope you hear that." How long he must wear the old coat or the old hat before they get him a new one. How chagrined they are at his independence of the English grammar. How long he hangs on. 70 years and not gone yet. 75 years and not gone yet. 80 years and not gone yet. Will he ever go? They think it of no use to have a doctor in his last sickness, and go up to the drugstore and get a dose of something that makes him worse, and economies on a coffin, and beat the undertaker down to the last point, giving a note for the reduced amount which they never pay. I have officiated at obsequies of aged people where the family have been so inordinately resigned to the providence that I felt like taking my text from Proverbs, "The eye that mocketh at its father, and refuseth to obey its mother, the ravens of the valley shall pick it out, and the young eagles shall eat it." In other words, such an ingrate ought to have a flock of crows for pallbearers. I congratulate you if you have the honor of providing for aged parents. The blessing of the Lord God of Joseph and Jacob will be on you. I rejoice to remember that though my father lived in a plain house the most of his days, he died in a mansion provided by the filial piety of a son who had achieved a fortune. There the octogenarian sat, and the servants waited on him, and there were plenty of horses and plenty of carriages to convey him, and a bower in which to sit on long summer afternoons, dreaming over the past, and there was not a room in the house where he was not welcome, and there were musical instruments of all sorts to regale him, and when life had passed, the neighbours came out and expressed all honour possible, and carried him to the village Machpelah and put him down beside the Rachel, with whom he had lived more than half a century. Share your successes with the old people. The probability is that the principles they inculcated achieved your forenoon. Give them a Christian percentage of kindly consideration. Let Joseph divide with Jacob the pasture fields of Goshen and the glories of the Egyptian court. And here I would like to sing the praises of the sisterhood who remained unmarried that they might administer to aged parents. The brutal world calls these self-sacrificing ones by ungallant names, and says they are peculiar or angular, but if you had had as many annoyances as they have had, Xantip would have been an angel compared with you. It is easier to take care of 5 rollicking, romping children than of one childish old man. Among the best women of Brooklyn and of yonder transpontine city are those who allowed the bloom of life to pass away while they were caring for their parents. While other maidens were sound asleep, they were soaking the old man's feet or tucking up the covers around the invalid mother. While other maidens were in the cotillion, they were dancing attendance upon rheumatism and spreading plasters for the lame back of the septuagenarian, and heating catnip tea for insomnia. In almost every circle of our kindred there has been some queen of self-sacrifice, to whom jewelled hand after jewelled hand was offered in marriage, but who stayed on the old place because of the sense of filial obligation until the health was gone and the attractiveness of personal presence had vanished. Little society may call such a one by a nickname. God calls her daughter, and heaven calls her saint, and I call her domestic Malta. A half-dozen ordinary women have not as much nobility as could be found in the smallest joint of the little finger of her left hand. Although the world has stood 6,000 years, this is the first apotheosis of maidenhood, although in the long line of those who have declined managed that they might be qualified for some especial mission are the names of Anna Ross, and Margaret Breckinridge, and Mary Shelton, and Anna Etheridge, and Georgiana Willits, the angels of the battlefields of Fair Oaks, and Lookout Mountain, and Chancellorsville, and Cooper Shop Hospital, and though single life has been honored by the fact that the 3 grandest men of the Bible, John and Paul and Christ, were celibates. Let the ungrateful world sneer at the maiden aunt, but God has a throne burnished for her arrival, and on one side of that throne in heaven there is a vase containing 2 jewels, the one brighter than the Koh-i-Noor of London Tower, and the other larger than any diamond ever found in the districts of Golconda, the one jewel by the lapidary of the palace cut with the words, "Inasmuch as ye did it to father," the other jewel by the lapidary of the palace cut with the words, "Inasmuch as ye did it to mother." Over the hills to the poorhouse is the exquisite ballad of Will Carleton, who found an old woman who had been turned off by her prospered sons, but I thank God I may find in my text over the hills to the palace. As if to disgust us with unfilial conduct, the Bible presents us the story of Micah, who stole the 1100 shekels from his mother, and the story of Absalom, who tried to dethrone his father. But all Hist 01Y is beautiful with stories of filial fidelity. Epaminondas, the warrior, found his chief.